Welcome back to Anime Realm. This is my recap for the anime The Brilliant Healer's New Life in the Shadows. If you enjoy my recaps, please think about subscribing. The story opens with a girl named Lily softly rousing our protagonist, Zenos, from his slumber. As he groggily blinks away the remnants of sleep, Lily is already in the kitchen, calmly preparing tea as if this quiet morning ritual is something they've shared 100 times before. We then quickly learn that in this world, a first-rate healer isn't just someone who mends wounds, they're someone with the power to reshape the world itself. In the kingdom of Herzith, healers play a key role in the country's rise, their influence so great that they've helped write the very history of the nation. Healers are deeply respected, having earned their status through decades of advancing the kingdom's reach. Most of them gather at the Royal Medical Institute to study, master complex healing magic, and earn their licenses before officially beginning their careers. But not all of them follow the traditional path. Somewhere in this kingdom, there's one healer who has no degree, no formal training, and no license, and that's Zenos. We then jump to a scene where Zenos is finishing up with a patient. After the treatment, the man pays and thanks him sincerely. Zenos just shrugs it off, telling him that as long as they can afford the price, he'll heal anyone. Once the man leaves, Lily asks if he's heading out for house calls today. Zenos confirms that he is, but promises to be back by nightfall. Lily smiles and tells him she'll have dinner ready when he gets home. Zenos heads out, and the moment the door closes, she turns her focus to preparing the evening meal. While Lily is still in the middle of cooking, Carmilla drops by to check on her. Lily apologizes, saying the food isn't quite ready yet, and Carmilla leans in to check what's cooking, and it turns out it's stew. Carmilla is already looking forward to dinner, but Lily tells her not to worry, she's got this handled. After all, she is Zenos' future bride. Hearing that, Carmilla backs off with a lazy grin and decides to head to her room and slack off. Not long after, Zofia shows up at the clinic looking for Zenos. Lily lets her know he's out on house calls, so Zofia decides to wait anyway, but she sighed because she came early, hoping to catch some time alone with him. But she wasn't the only one who thought about this because Linga soon arrives too, looking for Zenos. Lily gives her the same answer, and Linga pouts, clearly disappointed because she was planning to rub her tail on Zenos and smother him with affection. Zofia suggests she head back home since she's already here waiting, but Linga is not giving up that easily, and she'll wait too. Their rivalry starts to heat up, but Lily interrupts them both. Calm but firm, she reminds them it's her job to wait for Zenos, not theirs. Then right on cue, Lo crashes the door open like she owns the damn place, and says that she's here to have some fun with Zenos. Lily also gives her the usual update, but tells her to fix the door she broke first before she enters. Lo does, and once she steps inside, she is surprised to see everyone already gathered. She looks around and jokes that maybe it was Lily's cooking that pulled them all in. But the others shoot that idea down quick, and they make it clear that she's the only one who'd show up for food. Later, we see that Lily is near the end of her cooking, and with a small smile, she adds her secret herb mixed into the stew. She then turned to the others and told them they'd all wait for Zenos before starting dinner, inviting them to join in as well. They agreed without hesitation, and Lily looked forward to eating together. But just before taking a seat, she headed out to grab the laundry drying outside, leaving the others with the smell of stew lingering in the air, and it was driving them crazy. Lo and Linga exchanged one look, that kind of look that said, just a taste won't hurt, and within seconds, they were in the kitchen, spoons in hand. The second they tasted it, their self-control vanished. They kept saying they were just tasting, not really eating, but even Zofia could see they were lying through their teeth. She warned them that Lily was going to destroy them if she found out. But after one whiff of that stew, even she couldn't hold back. Outside, Lily was humming quietly, folding laundry under the afternoon sun, completely unaware of the culinary crime scene unfolding in her kitchen. Then we see that the girls realize that the stew has been entirely devoured, so they start blaming one another for finishing it all. And in a moment of panic, they decide to pretend they don't remember what happened. Realizing that denial won't solve the problem, they agree to make another meal instead. Zofia suggests they start fresh by adding new ingredients to the pot. But right then, Lily walks in and catches them mid-whisper, hovering around the pot like a bunch of thieves. Cut to the dinner table, and the girls sat there stiff as statues. Lily didn't yell. She didn't have to. Her glare did all the talking. When she calmly asked what happened, they crumbled fast. One blamed the smell, another said her hands moved on their own, and they all started bickering again. Seeing this shit show, Lily grows upset and warns them that if they continue to bicker, Zenos will be furious. She laments that she wanted to enjoy a meal with Zenos and the rest of them in peace, and the girls quickly apologize, promising to help her with the cooking. But Lily then reveals that she prepared only enough ingredients for tonight. Just then, Carmilla storms in, furious that they've consumed all of her stew. Linga immediately apologizes, and the others quickly follow suit. Carmilla demands to know how they plan to make amends, half-jokingly suggesting she might have to devour their souls in retribution. Lily intervenes, insisting that they bring her the missing ingredients, and the group hastily agrees, dispersing to gather them. After that whole mess, Lily realizes with a sigh that she's also just used the last of her secret ingredient. Carmilla, still lingering nearby, raises a brow and asks if she's not mad at the others for eating everything. Lily shrugs it off, saying she's not that angry, and Carmilla just stares at her like she's some kind of saint. Carmilla even adds that if they had devoured not just her stew, but also her wine, she might have cursed them. Lily just laughs nervously, not entirely sure if Carmilla's joking, but then her mind wanders if she'll even be able to cook dinner again before Zenos returns. Meanwhile, over in town, Zenos is walking through the streets when he spots a demi-human girl clutching her stomach in pain. Soon, her master appears and reveals that she is his slave. He demands to know where she ran off to, and she explains that she suffered from a stomachache and went to a clinic for help, but they turned her away because she lacked the money to pay for treatment. Enraged that she prioritized her own comfort over work, her master drags her away like she's a broken tool instead of a person. Zenos keeps watching as the man drags her all the way to a graveyard and literally throws her onto the ground like garbage. He mocks her, says this kind of dirty place suits a demi-human like her. Clearly not seeing the spirit his cruelty just awakened. He kicks her in the stomach again, demanding she get up and start digging graves, but she doesn't even have the strength to respond. Still, he ignores her pain and tells her if she wants to eat, she'd better dig up something valuable. Then he turns around to leave, leaving her lying there in the dirt. But before he can make it far, she snaps. Possessed by a spirit, the girl suddenly lashes out, slashing at him hard enough to draw blood, so now he's the one panicking. He stumbles backward and runs straight into Zenos, begging for help and saying his slave just went crazy. But Zenos doesn't even blink and tells the man to step aside and listens as the man points at his slave. Seeing her, Zenos calmly asks what exactly he did to her. The guy explains that he merely told her to resume her work. And when Zenos asks about the work, the man starts deflecting, lies about it, and says that it is just some farm work. He then flips the script, whining about being injured and needing medical help. And he even offers Zenos money if he'll stop the girl. The possessed slave then launches an attack on the master, but Zenos intervenes to protect him. He questions the slave, asking why she's so angry. In response, she hurls stones at him, which he deftly dodges. Impressed by his agility, the noble urges Zenos to kill the slave, but Zenos refuses, insisting that his duty as a healer is to preserve life. The noble admits he is a man of high status and warns that if this chaos continues, he will eventually meet his end, and he plans to buy a new slave if she dies anyway. Undeterred, Zenos vows that he will save every life he can, firmly committed to his calling as a healer. The slave then lunges at him, hurling a large boulder, but Zenos, drawing on some mysterious enhancement, shatters it with his bare hands. The noble, watching in disbelief, wonders what kind of healer could possess such strength. The slave immediately resumes her attack with lightning speed, making Zenos doubt that she's just any ordinary demi-human. She slashes at him with her claws, but he manages to fend her off with a protective barrier, only to notice that the force of the blows has left her badly injured. Despite her wounds, the slave keeps moving, her every motion fueled by pure, unbridled hatred, and it dawns on him that she must be possessed. Moving closer, Zenos braces himself as she sinks her teeth into him. In that surreal moment, he's startled by the thought that ghosts can not only possess, but even engage in casual banter, or at least that seems to be the case. Determined, he channels his healing magic to mend her injuries while simultaneously exorcising the malevolent spirit that has taken hold of her. As he works, he can't help but wonder what kind of farm work would lead someone to be so vulnerable to ghostly possession. Once the exorcism is complete, he mutters that he's done for the day. The noble is taken aback when he sees that Zenos has easily healed the slave's crushed foot. Desperate, he begs Zenos to save him too, reminding Zenos that he is a healer. Zenos calmly replies that his work for the day is done and that he'll have to do it tomorrow, to which the noble retorts that by then he'd already be dead. Undeterred, the noble insists on immediate treatment, and Zenos warns him that the price will be steep. The noble scrambles through all the money he has on hand, insisting it should be enough, but Zenos shakes his head and says it's not. The noble grumbles that the fee is already higher than market price, adding that he won't go unscathed if Zenos charges illegally. But Zenos tells him that he is an unlicensed healer. The noble is taken aback to learn such healers exist, and Zenos dryly comments that it's a shady business, much like grave robbing. The noble tries to play dumb, but Zenos sees right through him and declares that the remainder of the fee will come in the form of the slave's documents. The noble seems indifferent and accepts this deal, then departs after being healed. After the noble leaves, the slave slowly awakens. She's startled to see Zenos hovering over her, and her stomach still churns with pain. She asks him who he is, and he bluntly reveals that he is Zenos and that he just bought her. He then asks for her name, and she murmurs that it's Tylee. Zenos orders her to remove her clothes, explaining that he's spent a lot of money on her and needs to check her physical condition thoroughly. Tylee hesitates for a moment, but understanding she has no choice, so she complies. As Zenos examines her, he notices that her bile duct is blocked with gallstones and severely inflamed. Zenos then reveals that he had suspected this, and he also observed that she has symptoms of jaundice, so he followed her. He heals her in seconds, and she asks him what he just did. Calm as ever, he replied that he'd opened up her abdomen, removed the gallstones, and closed it back up. She's shocked because there is no chanting, no magic sigils, and somehow, no scar at all. He acted like it was no big deal, saying any healer could pull it off, but she didn't let that slide and told him straight that no, they absolutely couldn't. Tylee then thanked him from the heart, still unsure how she could possibly make it up to him. That's when he mentioned he had a task for her. She didn't even hesitate and told him she was ready to do whatever it takes to return the favor. So he handed her a drawing of a herb and asked if she could locate it. She said she could, told him to come along, and not long after, we see her finding the exact herb for him. It turns out to be the same one Lily had used earlier in her cooking. He thanked her for it, but she brushed it off, saying it was easy, and honestly she thought he was going to ask for something completely different. Zenos then told her that her part was done, but she didn't feel like it was nearly enough. He disagreed, telling her that as a rule, he only takes compensation that matches the effort he gives. She still didn't think she'd done anything worth that kind of help, but he told her the truth. It may seem small, but it's something he couldn't have done without her. Then without waiting, he tore up her contract and told her she was free to choose her own path now. She admitted she didn't know what that path was yet, but she would figure it out, and when she did, she'd come back and let him know. He didn't mind and wished her well and told her to come find him again if she ever got hurt. Later that night, he returned home. Lily greeted him, telling him dinner wasn't ready yet. Right then, the three food thieves came back from gathering ingredients, and he couldn't help but wonder why they were even here. They kept their mouths shut about having already eaten his share, and Lily decided to whip up something new. Zenos stepped into another room, and the moment Carmilla caught sight of him, she smirked because she could tell something was different, like she could literally smell another woman on him. He shot her a look and told her to shut it. Lily then asks him to wait while she prepares dinner, but he stops her, and she catches on quickly because what he really wants is some black tea, and she tells him that she'd go make it right away. We're taken back to a time when Zenos was once a member of a prestigious adventuring party known as the Golden Phoenix. But everything shifted the day their leader, Astan, tossed him a gold coin like a master throwing scraps to a servant. Without a shred of hesitation, Astan declared that Zenos was no longer part of the group. He called him dead weight, claiming the party would thrive faster without someone like him holding them back. Zenos knew better. Deep down, he was the glue holding this reckless team together, but Astan didn't care. The truth was, Zenos had only been recruited to act as a disposable meat shield, someone nobody would cry over if he died on the battlefield. Now that the party had grown powerful, Astan believed they didn't need Zenos anymore. Zenos tried to make him see reason, pointing out that the only reason they made it this far was because he was always there to patch them up after Astan's dumb decisions. But Astan shut him down, mocking his rough, unlicensed healing magic and saying any half-decent healer could replace him. Elsewhere, tucked in the shadows of a grimy alleyway, a pair of slave dealers were in the middle of trying to subdue an elf girl. The awful woman reminded the ugly guy to be gentle, since elves were incredibly rare and worth more if they were unbruised. The guy already had her pinned, but Lily, despite everything, wasn't going down easy. She slammed her foot to his gold balls, and while he was doubled over in pain, she bolted. She almost made it too, but the man grabbed his bow and shot an arrow straight into her ankle. Lily crashed to the ground, unable to run, and the bastard caught up quickly. He tried to pin her again, but she chomped down on his hand like a rabid dog, forcing him to stab her just to break free. That's when Zenos walked into the alley and spotted the scene, Lily bleeding on the ground, barely conscious. He looked at the two bastards and asked if they were the ones responsible. They didn't even try to deny it. They told him to piss off, reminding him that slavery was perfectly legal around here. Lily was their property, and they could do whatever they wanted with her. Zenos understands the situation. They were technically right by the law, so his hands were tied. But then he thought of something. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the very gold coin Astan threw at him, and offered to buy Lily. It's not nearly enough to buy an elf, not even a wounded one. But the traders take one look at Lily, bleeding out and probably minutes from death, and decide it's not worth dragging a corpse to market. So they took the money and left without another word. Once those scumbags are gone, Zenos walks over to Lily, checking if she's still hanging on. She's already made peace with the idea of dying in some random alley, so she tells him to just leave her there and save himself the trouble. But Zenos calmly tells her she's not dying today. Lily glances down at her wounds and blinks in disbelief because her wounds are already completely closed up. Not even a scar left behind. She looks at him stunned and quietly thanks him, apologizing for making him spend his gold coin just to save her. But Zenos brushes it off. He didn't even want to keep that coin anyway. Just holding it reminded him of Astan, and he'd rather forget that asshole existed. He asks Lily if she's got anywhere she can go, but she doesn't. I mean, she was a slave 2 minutes ago, so she doesn't exactly have a house or wallet waiting for her. She also admits she's starving, so Zenos offers to get her something to eat and maybe find her some decent clothes along the way. He ends up taking her to a small diner nearby, grabbing her a fresh outfit before they come in. Lily is all smiles as she chows down, clearly loving every bite of her first real meal in who knows how long. But after a while, she notices that Zenos hasn't ordered anything for himself, so she asks why, and he tells her he's just not hungry. But truth is, he's flat broke. He spent everything he had on her food and clothes, and since he got kicked out of Golden Phoenix, he's gonna need to figure something out fast before he ends up starving in the streets. As they're sitting there, a guy stumbles through the door, his arms a mess, burned and bleeding, clearly injured, and from the looks of it, he's been in some trouble and barely made it out. Zenos watches him quietly, analyzing the damage. Judging by the hole in the arm and the scorched edges, it looks like the guy caught a hit from a magic gun. Fortunately, he's a lizardman, and their bodies regenerate pretty well on their own. But even so, that injury's deep. If left untreated, it could take days to close up, and he'd be in constant pain the whole time. So Zenos lifts his hand and casts a healing spell, and after a few seconds, the wound seals up like it was never there. The man freezes, looks down at his good as new arm, then turns to Zenos with wide eyes, asking who the hell he is. Before Zenos can even speak, Lily jumps in and proudly declares that he's a legendary healer. The guy's never heard of him, but he's clearly impressed and grateful, so he really doesn't care. He then gives a few coins to Zenos as a way of thanks and promises to spread the word about Zenos. At first, Zenos doesn't get why the guy just handed him money. Then it hits him. Healers usually charge for their services. That spark ignites something in his brain, and he starts thinking, if he plays this right, he could start a new life as a full-time healer. But there's a problem. Since he's from the slums, getting an official healing license isn't exactly on the table. And if he opens a legit business, he'll have to deal with taxes, permits, inspections, all the red tape. And like a wise man once said, tax evasion isn't a crime. It's an act of survival. So yeah, Zenos is going off the grid. He's gonna run his clinic underground, healer for hire, no questions asked. Lily doesn't really get everything Zenos is saying, but if he's serious about setting up a clinic, she wants in. Zenos pauses, thinking it over. Running an underground clinic without a permit isn't exactly legal, and dragging a kid into something like that doesn't sit right with him. But Lily reminds him that he technically bought her, so by the rules of this twisted world, that makes him her master now, which means she's sticking by his side, no matter how many rules get bent or broken. Zenos didn't buy her to own her, he just didn't want her bleeding out in some alley. But Lily hits him with a harsh truth, she's got nowhere else to go, and if he leaves her behind, she'll probably get scooped up and sold again, so that'd be on him. Eventually, Zenos sighs and gives in and tells her she can tag along, and Lily immediately pledges to serve him with her whole body, which makes Zenos nearly choke and ask her to not make it sound so creepy. Anyway, first things first, if Zenos is going to set up shop, he's got to find a roof to sleep under. So he takes Lily to one of the sketchiest, most forgotten parts of the city. The place looks abandoned and borderline cursed, but that's exactly what he's looking for. Lily glances around nervously and asks why they're even here. Zenos explains that if he's running a shady back alley clinic, the last thing he needs is the Royal Association breathing down his neck. A place like this is quiet, off the radar, and best of all it's free. Lily can't really argue with the logic, but she's clearly spooked. She points out that abandoned districts like this are notorious for being infested with monsters, especially the creepy kind. They finally stumble across a house that's somehow still standing, and Zenos thinks he's hit the jackpot. But the second Lily sees it, she freezes because it looks like something straight out of a horror novel. Classic haunted house vibes. If they're unlucky, they might even attract a wraith. Zenos raises an eyebrow, unfamiliar with the term. Lily explains that wraiths are ghost-type monsters who can literally turn someone into a spirit with just a single touch. They step inside, and it's pitch black, so Lily offers to light the place up with a basic spell. That catches Zenos off guard because he didn't know she could use magic. But Lily shrugs it off, saying it's just simple stuff. Once the room lights up, they finally get a good look around, and it's honestly as bad as Lily feared. Dust, cobwebs, cracked walls, it's a total fixer-upper. But Zenos is oddly upbeat. The place might look cursed, but the roof doesn't leak, and the structure's solid, so in his eyes, that's more than enough to start his new work. But just when they think they've found the perfect spot, a big problem shows up and turns out the house already has a tenant. And not just any tenant, but an actual wraith. who floats out of the shadows and tells Zenos she's going to drain the life right out of him. Lily starts panicking immediately, while Zenos just lets out a sigh, clearly annoyed that the place wasn't as empty as it looked. Carmilla then lunges at Zenos without hesitation, but he shuts her down instantly with a burst of healing magic that blasts both her arms clean off. He doesn't even flinch, because compared to the horrors he faced in the labyrinths while rolling with Golden Phoenix, Carmilla is just another Tuesday. Back then, whenever Aston got pissy, he'd toss Zenos into the dungeon solo, and he ran into wraiths all the time, so he's taken down dozens, maybe even over 100 by now. See, healing spells aren't just for fixing wounds. They're especially nasty against undead creatures. Zenos then casually apologizes to Carmilla for trespassing, saying he didn't realize someone already lived here, but the housing options are non-existent around here, so he politely asks if she'd be okay with him staying. Carmilla's offended by the sheer audacity. She's the queen of wraiths, and some random squatter is asking if he can crash at her place, so she snaps her ghostly fingers and summons a whole crew of angry spirits to chase him out. Zenos sighs again, then hits them all with a mass heal spell that erases them like chalk off a blackboard. Now Carmilla's the one panicking. She seriously underestimated this guy, and she's halfway convinced he could just exorcise her out of existence if he wanted to. But Zenos explains that he's not here to fight. He just needs a place to live and treat patients. Carmilla knows she's outmatched, so she agrees to let him and Lily have the first floor, but she claims the second floor as her territory. Zenos is happy with the deal, but Lily is stuck trying to figure out which one of them is more terrifying. Carmilla, the ghost queen, or Zenos, the healer who casually obliterates spirits. By the time morning rolls around, Lily's getting restless. With no patients yet, she offers to go outside and spread the word about their new clinic. But Zenos quickly shuts that down. If they start advertising out in the open, the Royal Hospital might catch wind of what they're doing, and that would be bad news. He tells her to be patient, and someone's bound to show up soon. And right on cue, the front door creaks open, and their first customer steps inside. Lily jumps up to welcome them, only to realize it's the same guy Zenos patched up the day before. Zenos figured he'd return eventually because anyone getting blasted by a magic gun usually isn't walking the clean and lawful path, and people like that tend to avoid legit hospitals for obvious reasons. The Lizard D-Man introduces himself as Zond and says he needs Zenos to check on his sister. Zenos says he'll take a look, so Zofia rolls up her sleeve and shows him a shallow wound on her arm. She says the injury's been acting weird since yesterday, and the moment Zenos inspects it, he realizes she's been hit with some kind of magic-based poison. Zofia asks if there's anything he can do to fix it, but since the wound's been left untreated all night, the tissue in her arm is basically toast. Zenos tells her the safest option is to cut the whole arm off before the poison spreads any further. Zofia's not thrilled to hear that, but she takes it like a champ. She asks how much it'll cost to have the procedure done. Zenos tells her the price is a flat 1 million yen. Zond flips out the second he hears that. Furious that Zenos would charge that much for just chopping an arm off, he's ready to throw down, but Zofia tells him to chill and decides to negotiate instead. She tries to pull rank, asking if Zenos really wants to overcharge someone like her, Zofia the Tornado. She runs one of the 3 major gangs in the area, and Zenos knows exactly who she is. Even so, he's not backing down. He doesn't do charity work, especially not when regeneration magic is involved. That catches Zofia off guard because she's never heard of any healer who could regenerate a whole limb. Zenos is just as confused, since he assumed limb regeneration was basic stuff. He taught himself healing magic, so he never really figured out what's considered normal. But that's beside the point, and he asks Zofia if she wants to proceed. Zofia gives him the green light, so he has her lie down and gets prepped for the operation. He conjures a magic scalpel, essentially a blade made entirely of condensed energy. Zofia is a little concerned because she's never seen anything like that before, but Zenos reassures her it's razor sharp, completely sterile, and ideal for surgery. And again, he's surprised other healers don't use it. He gets to work, numbing the area with a steady stream of healing magic. Once it's dulled enough, he slices off the infected part and shifts his focus to growing a new arm. His hands glow brighter as he ramps up the spell's intensity, rebuilding the entire limb one layer at a time, from bone to skin. Zofia stares at her freshly regenerated arm in disbelief. She flexes her fingers and is stunned it feels completely natural. She admits Zenos definitely earned his asking price, and as a bonus she offers to send any injured members of her crew his way from now on. And Zenos has no objections, as long as they're paying like everybody else. In the days that follow, Zenos starts getting flooded with patients from the Lizardman faction, and seeing how tired he looks, Lily decides to make him some tea to help him relax. Zenos thanks her for being thoughtful, but he notices that she brought 3 cups instead of 2, so Lily explains that the third one is for Carmilla. Zenos doubts she'd be interested in joining them downstairs, but to his surprise, Carmilla actually has a soft spot for tea. While sipping in relative peace, Lily asked Zenos if he had any clue why the lizardmen kept ending up in such rough shape. Based on the injuries he's treated, Zenos figures there's some kind of turf war going on between rival groups. And right on cue, the front door gets kicked in. A pack of werewolves storms into the clinic, and their leader Linga wastes no time announcing that she's here to kill Zenos. She's been clashing with the lizardmen for days, but no matter how many of them she wounds, they keep bouncing back. So now, she wants to cut off their recovery at the source. Zenos calmly tells her that he doesn't work for any faction, and would prefer not to turn his clinic into a battlefield. But Linga doesn't care, and she already gave the command to attack. Her crew rushes in, but thanks to Zenos' defensive magic, nothing they throw at him even leaves a scratch. So it's like their attacks bounced off him like pebbles hitting a brick wall. Realizing she can't hurt him directly, Linga decides to trash the clinic instead. But it's a damn bad move, because this place isn't just Zenos' clinic, it's also Carmilla's house. And if there's one thing Carmilla won't tolerate, it's people messing with her home. The second the werewolves catch sight of Carmilla, every ounce of bravado drains from their face because no one in their right mind wants to fight a wraith, let alone the Queen of Wraiths. Carmilla was seconds away from turning them all into spirit dust, but Zenos stepped in. He asked her to spare them. After all, this was still a clinic, not an execution site, and as long as they cleaned up the damage they caused, he was willing to let it slide. Carmilla gave them a death glare, but eventually agreed and floated back upstairs. Seeing how even the Queen of the Wraith obeyed Zenos, Linga's entire tone flipped. She dropped to her knees, begging for forgiveness, promising to repair the damage and keep her people in check. The very next day, an orc shows up at the door with a message. Lo, the leader of the orc faction, wants to meet with Zenos personally. Zenos knew this kind of mess was only a matter of time, especially after he'd already taken care of two of the major slum leaders. Lo was the top dog among the orcs and ogres, running the whole scene, and she'd raked in a ton of cash just by smashing through magic stone mines with nothing but brute strength. Dealing with her wasn't exactly ideal, but on the bright side, once he sorted things out with her, nobody would dare mess with his clinic again, so might as well get it over with now. Before heading out though, he paused to ask the orc if Loa was reasonable enough to actually talk things out. The orc assured him Loa was the wisest, most dignified person he'd ever meet, which sounded promising. But it made Zenos wonder why Loa didn't just come herself. When he asked, the orc explained that she couldn't actually move right now. That definitely didn't sound good, so Zenos wasted no more time and followed him straight to Loa. They ended up inside a cave, where Zenos was finally introduced to Loa. She greeted him warmly enough, but before he got started, Zenos asked her how she even found out about him in the first place. Loa casually mentioned that the lizardmen and werewolves couldn't stop running their mouths about some top-secret healer they weren't supposed to mention to anyone. Clearly, his days as an underground healer weren't lasting long at this rate, but he'd worry about that later. Loa had heard Zenos could heal any injury for the right price, and she wanted to see for herself if he really lived up to the hype. He walked over and raised his hand towards her, prompting Loa to ask what exactly he was doing. Zenos explained he couldn't see any obvious external injuries, so he was scanning her insides to check for internal damage. She seemed pretty surprised, since most healers apparently didn't know how to do that, but Zenos figured it should have been standard practice. After all, how the hell else could anyone treat a patient properly? Once Zenos completed his scan, he quickly noticed something off. There was a lump deep in her stomach radiating mana, which suggested it was probably a mana stone. Loa confirmed his guess and explained this wasn't just any stone, it was enchanted with explosion magic. So if she tried to move even slightly, the whole thing might blow up. Zenos immediately thought someone must have tried to assassinate her by sneaking it into her food or something, but Loa clarified it wasn't anything sinister like that. In fact, she'd simply gotten really hungry, saw something that looked like a rice ball, and ended up swallowing the freaking stone by accident. She even insisted it was an honest mistake that anyone could have made. Zenos definitely doubted that, but he wasn't too worried either way. After all, mana stones usually found their own way out eventually. Zenos started heading out, but Loa stopped him, saying things weren't that simple, because when she'd eaten that damn mana stone, she'd accidentally chewed it up, meaning there wasn't much time left before it blew. Lo had already made peace with dying because of her dumb mistake, but she couldn't bear the thought of her men refusing to abandon her. Zenos then asked what she expected him to do about it, and Lo explained she just wanted him there so she could leave all her wealth to him. Because if she exploded, the empire she'd built would collapse, and she'd rather have her fortune go to someone decent than let it fall into the wrong hands. Apparently, while researching Zenos, she'd found out he charged high prices for healing, but never took money for treating kids, which made her convinced he was a genuinely good guy. Lo then tossed him a key, explaining it would give him access to her treasure vault after her death. But Zenos never agreed to let her die in the first place, and considering she hadn't blown up yet, He knew she must have eaten the stone recently enough to save her. Without a second thought, he summoned his magic scalpel and moved right toward her. Loa's men initially panicked and tried stopping him, but before they could intervene, Zenos had already made his move. In just a few seconds, he'd sliced open Loa's stomach, pulled out the explosive mana stone, and healed her wound without a hitch. Everyone was speechless as he calmly showed them the dangerous stone in his hand. But the stone was still primed to explode, so to keep everyone safe, Zenos wrapped his hands tightly around it, containing the blast. The explosion could have easily wiped out the entire cave, but he'd shielded his hands with defensive magic beforehand, so despite the pain, he was fine. Afterward, Zenos handed Lo back her key, telling her there was no need to donate her fortune anymore. Lo couldn't quite believe that he'd actually chosen to save her instead of grabbing the cash, but Zenos shrugged it off, saying he only charged a fair price for healing, so taking an entire fortune would have been excessive. At that moment, Lo decided she genuinely liked Zenos, promising him that if he ever needed anything, he just had to ask, and she'd do whatever she could to help him. She even offered to deploy her warriors as guards around his clinic. But Zenos politely declined because having orc soldiers on his doorstep would attract too much attention. A few days passed, and Lily was sitting by the clinic's front desk, sulking because Zofia, Linga, and Lo had been coming by a lot more than usual. Zenos noticed that too because those three had been showing up regularly, but none of them seemed injured. He started wondering why they even bothered visiting, and at first he thought they were probably just bored. But Carmilla quickly corrected him, explaining that those women were clearly in love with him. Zenos couldn't wrap his head around that idea, because in his eyes, he was just an ordinary underground healer and nothing special. But Carmilla was confident she knew what she was talking about. Lily became worried at the idea that one of those girls might start dating Zenos and take all his attention away. But Zenos assured her he'd never date any of them, not to be mean or anything. But he thought they were all kind of crazy weird. Still, Carmilla warned, it was only a matter of time before those three started a war to decide who got to claim Zenos. He thought things would never escalate that far, but as fate would have it, the very next day Zofia came into the clinic with a basket of fruit, casually mentioning she planned to declare war on the other factions, for reasons she conveniently refused to explain. Right after her, Linga and Lo showed up as well, each bringing their own gifts and also talking about starting a war against the others. Zenos protested loudly, trying to get them to reconsider, but they flat out refused to listen. Carmilla found the entire situation hilarious, joking that many people were about to die due to Zenos' apparent womanizing tendencies. Zenos didn't appreciate the way she put it, but there was no denying he had a major problem on his hands. The deathmatch was already scheduled to begin at noon, and Zenos couldn't just sit back and let them kill each other over something this silly, so he had to take action. After a while at the stadium, Zofia, Linga, and Lo had already gathered their respective armies, fully prepared for an all-out brawl. The atmosphere was tense, and just as the battle was about to kick off, Zenos suddenly appeared, causing everyone to stop and look in his direction. The three girls watched him closely, waiting to see what he'd say. But Zenos surprised everyone by calmly stating he wasn't there to stop them. He acknowledged their long-standing grudges against each other and figured it was better to let them fight it out until they were satisfied, instead of trying to force a peace they didn't want. With Zenos' blessing, the girls all agreed they would fight with everything they had, and as an added incentive, whoever survived the fight would get to claim Zenos' virginity. Zenos didn't recall agreeing to that damn part, but before he could object or clarify anything, the battle had already started. Zofia was the first to make a move, lunging forward with her daggers aiming straight for Linga's neck. But Linga quickly dodged the attack, backflipping to safety. In that instant, Lo jumped into action, trying to flatten Zofia with a flying dropkick. But Zofia saw it coming just in time, sidestepping the attack, which resulted in Lo accidentally smashing into some poor background characters instead, as if she were bowling. Zofia and Linga fought again, their weapons locked as they struggled to overpower each other. Just as they were about to land decisive blows, Lo returned to the fray, leaping down from above and nearly crushing both of them beneath her massive attack. Zofia stumbled into the orc section of the stadium, prompting her to fight her way out, and soon everyone else followed suit, turning on each other's factions and triggering complete chaos. The scene quickly became brutal, people slashing, cutting, and throwing punches left and right. Yet, astonishingly, even after 6 relentless hours of battle, not a single combatant had fallen. It was at that moment Zofia suddenly noticed something strange. The wounds on her arms were healing themselves right before her eyes. Everyone paused, bewildered, until Zenos finally spoke up and explained he was responsible. He told them plainly that he'd agreed to let them have their little death battle, but he never once said he'd let anyone actually die. After all, they were still his patients, and he wasn't going to let any shit happen to them. Zofia felt silly for not realizing Zenos' involvement sooner, but none of them had ever imagined a healer could heal so many people simultaneously. let alone continuously over 6 hours straight. The girls finally understood the point Zenos had been trying to make. Their fight would literally never end as long as he was there to keep healing them. If they couldn't find a way to get along, they'd be stuck in an endless cycle of pointless conflict. And just to be clear, he reminded them, he planned on billing each of them for every hour he'd spent healing. Realizing how foolish they had been, the 3 girls finally agreed to set their differences aside, so they promised to maintain peace among their factions. But as far as fighting over Zenos went, they were still determined. Only this time, they agreed they'd compete peacefully without any damn bloodshed. Meanwhile, Lily approached Zenos, curious as to why the hell he'd gone through all the trouble of intervening in the battle. Zenos paused for a moment, remembering something his old teacher once told him. A healer who could only mend wounds was third-rate. A second-rate healer could restore the entire body. But a first-rate healer was someone who could make the world a better place. Zenos admitted he wasn't sure if he had it in him to be a first-rate healer. But that didn't mean he wouldn't try. He wanted to improve life in these slums somehow, and besides he joked that if everyone died, he'd run out of patience. Lily smiled softly to herself, knowing full well that Zenos' tough talk was just his way of covering up how much he truly cared. After all, if the demi-humans stopped fighting, he'd actually have fewer patients coming in, which meant less money for him. Yet he still chose peace over profit, and this genuine kindness was exactly why Lily liked him so much. And she told him as much directly. Of course, her words went straight over Zenos' head, leaving him slightly confused. In any case, it was getting late, and Zenos decided it was time to go collect payment and head back home. Lily was a bit taken aback. She had thought Zenos was joking earlier when he said he'd charge them for all the healing during their battle. But apparently, he was completely serious. Healing an entire stadium full of people was exhausting work, and there was no way he'd let something like that slide without compensation. At the same time over in the capital, the commander of the Royal Knights was meeting privately with the Vice Commander Krishna. Noticing the commander's troubled expression, Krishna asked if something had happened. He explained he'd heard a strange rumor. Apparently the long-standing war among the demi-human factions in the slums had abruptly come to an end. Krishna found this difficult to believe. Those factions had been locked in a bloody feud for years, so it seemed impossible they'd suddenly decided to play nice. The commander agreed it sounded unlikely, but if true, this was potentially a serious problem. The kingdom had been stable for centuries precisely because the impoverished, disenfranchised people were always too busy fighting among themselves to cause trouble for the nobility. So if these factions found peace and united, they could demand changes, perhaps even outrageous stuff like rights, equality, and maybe even free healthcare, and that shit would be a big problem. Rumor had it that a single individual was responsible for mediating peace between these factions. Determined to eliminate this threat, the commander tasked Krishna with dealing with him. Krishna accepted the assignment without hesitation, promising she would track down this troublemaker and arrest him for the crime of disturbing the war by bringing the damn peace. Meanwhile, back at Zenos' clinic, Zenos sneezed suddenly, which made everyone around him worry that he might have caught a cold. Linga immediately offered her fluffy tail as a blanket, while Lo enthusiastically invited him to warm up by burying his face between her legendary black cushion. And that shit makes Lily so devastated because she didn't have either of them. Zenos then insisted it was nothing more than a regular sneeze, reminding them all that he still needed to heal Zofia, so they should probably quiet down until he finished his work. After carefully healing Zofia's injured arm, Zenos asked her how the hell exactly she'd managed to hurt herself, since it had been a long time since he'd needed to patch her up. Zofia admitted she'd gotten hurt on the job last night. Her usual work involved stealing from corrupt nobles and redistributing the wealth to the poor like the legendary Robin Hood. But this time she was caught sneaking into the wrong aristocrat's home. She had encountered Krishna, the vice commander of the Royal Knights, a ruthless woman known for shooting first and asking questions later, typically with her magic fire guns. Hearing this, Carmilla began to worry that catching Krishna's attention might spell trouble for Zenos. But Zenos wasn't particularly concerned. After all, he figured there was no reason for someone as high-ranking as Krishna to care about a low-profile underground healer like himself. Elsewhere in the slums, Krishna was already prowling around, gathering information on Zenos. She noticed the demi-humans coexisting peacefully, which made her suspicious, so she approached a lizardman and asked bluntly who was responsible for ending the demi-human war. The lizardman didn't recognize Krishna, but he was fully aware Zenos wanted to keep his identity hidden, so he refused to say anything, and tries to walk away. But Krishna wasn't having it, and drew her gun, threatening to shoot his precious stick if he didn't talk. However, the lizardman didn't budge. He was ready to take a bullet if it meant protecting Zenos. Just then, Zofia and her brother happened to pass by. Seeing them approach, Krishna realized she wasn't prepared to deal with Zofia right then, so she quickly slipped away into the abandoned section of the city. Wandering aimlessly, she stumbled upon Zenos' clinic by sheer luck and decided to go inside to ask for directions back to the main city. Zenos kindly offered to show her the way, but right as he was about to help her out, Lily walked into the room with some tea. The moment Krishna caught sight of Lily's elf ears, her expression darkened instantly. And without warning, she drew her magic fire gun and fired a blast directly at Zenos' damn head. Lily just can't wrap her head around how the hell Krishna could straight up shoot Zenos in the damn head out of nowhere. But Krishna holds her ground, claiming she had every reason to do it. On top of her main mission, she was also assigned to look into a string of kidnappings happening around the area, and the second she saw that Zenos was human and Lily was an elf, she instantly assumed he had to be the culprit. So naturally, her gut reaction was to pull the trigger without a second thought. Krishna's logic has numerous flaws, so Lily quickly clarifies that Zenos essentially adopted her, and she's staying here willingly. Krishna soon realizes she may have rushed to judgment, and upon further consideration, it would indeed be strange for a kidnapping victim to appear as cheerful as Lily. Fortunately, the bullets she used were non-lethal, so she assumes she didn't kill Zenos, though she suspects he might have been knocked unconscious by the impact. Yet, to her astonishment, Zenos seems completely unharmed. She apologizes for hastily shooting him due to her mistaken assumption. Yet she remains curious as to how he survived without a damn injury. He explains that he simply used defensive magic to block the bullet before it reached him. But Krishna doubts this, stating that ordinary defensive magic should never be capable of blocking her bullets. As far as Zenos is aware, his defensive spells should be perfectly ordinary, so he doesn't quite understand her point. However, throughout her career as the vice commander of the Royal Knights, she has witnessed numerous types of defensive magic, and she immediately recognizes that Zenos' shield matches that of a grand sorcerer. The moment Krishna mentions her position as vice commander of the Royal Knights, Zenos and Lily instantly become uneasy, realizing that her presence could cause significant trouble for them. Krishna, however, evidently has something specific she wishes to request from Zenos. Hoping to avoid further confrontation, Zenos agrees to speak with her, but simultaneously sends a discreet warning to all his clients, urging them not to visit while Krishna is present. They all sit down together, and Krishna explains to Zenos that she's currently undertaking a covert mission and would like his cooperation. Zenos insists that he doesn't wish to become involved, but Krishna argues that it's the duty of every citizen to cooperate with the orders of knights. Given Krishna's unpredictable nature, Zenos figured refusing could end with another bullet to the face, so he reluctantly decides to go along with her request. Krishna then informs him that her mission is to locate a specific man and arrest him immediately upon identification. She has neither a name nor description, but the person she's after is the mediator responsible for ending the conflict between the various factions. Zenos chokes on his tea once he figures out that the individual Krishna is attempting to capture is actually him. But he remains calm and inquires why she's pursuing the mediator. Krishna clarifies that the knight's orders absolutely can't disregard someone who possesses the ability to create peace among the factions. But when she resorted to aggressively questioning one of the locals, he refused to give her any damn information despite her threats. From Krishna's perspective, if the residents of the slums won't betray the mediator, it must imply he's a sinister mastermind who needs to be stopped. Zenos attempts to reason with her, suggesting it's entirely possible that this mediator is deliberately keeping a low profile. So if she simply leaves and abandons her search, he likely won't cause any issues. Krishna then asks Zenos if he personally knows who the mediator might be, so he quickly makes up an excuse, saying he's merely speaking intuitively. Regardless, Krishna insists that she can't just ignore the mediator since she received explicit orders from her commander, and anyone capable of ending the conflict between the factions represents too significant a risk to ignore. Lily intervenes and tells Krishna there's no need to worry about the mediator destabilizing the country, because his only interest is earning money through honest labor. But judging by the way Lily is describing the mediator, it sounds as if she knows him personally. Lily immediately panics and quickly assures Krishna that she doesn't know the mediator either, causing Krishna to grow somewhat suspicious. But she decides to let it slide for the moment. As it's getting late, Zenos uses this as an opportunity to encourage Krishna to leave. But while he's escorting her out, she notices the bed placed in the corner. She finds it unusual that Zenos would position a bed in this spot, causing Zenos to grow anxious because it's actually the clinic's patient bed, prompting him to nervously claim it's just an extra bed. Upon hearing this, Krishna promptly asks Zenos if he'd be agreeable to letting her use it. She's been struggling to secure a base of operations within the slums, so she'd greatly appreciate it if Zenos allowed her to stay here until she finishes her assignment. Of course, she's more than willing to compensate him for the lodging. Zenos can't really decline without raising Krishna's suspicions, so he reluctantly agrees, and Carmilla finds the whole scenario amusing. Lily then prepares some green tea for their new guest, but Krishna struggles with hot beverages, so she begins blowing on it to cool it down. Lily remains envious that yet another woman has appeared, vying for Zenos' attention away from her. So, to prove her dominance, she sits directly on Zenos' lap and asks him to stroke her head like usual. Zenos complies with Lily's request, but he's slightly puzzled by her sudden demand, prompting Carmilla to approach and inform him that Lily is feeling jealous. Zenos is caught off guard because Carmilla suddenly whispered into his ear while she was invisible, but she's just really intrigued by all the drama going on. Lily is determined not to let Krishna take away Zenos' attention, so she becomes even more affectionate with him than usual, asserting her dominance. However, Krishna doesn't seem to give a damn and just keeps blowing on her tea like nothing's happening. But eventually, Lily dozes off, so Zenos gently tucks her into bed and heads back to the living room to continue his conversation with Krishna. He fills her in on the whole story about how he rescued Lily from the slave trader, adding that those scumbags were part of an illegal trafficking network operating around here. And that explains why Krishna was so quick to pull the trigger earlier. But sadly, Zenos doesn't have any real intel on the traffickers themselves. Changing the topic slightly, Krishna brings up something she's been curious about. Given how it's obvious Zenos must be an extremely skilled mage, having perfected his defensive magic, Krishna wants to know if someone could regenerate an entire arm if they put the same amount of effort into healing magic. Zenos starts to question whether healing an arm is really such a rare feat for a healer. But before he can complete his thought, Krishna interjects, insisting that it should be impossible. The only individuals who could achieve something like that would be saints or healers of the absolute highest caliber. Confused about why she is bringing this up, Zenos asks Krishna for an explanation. Krishna then describes how she recently fought against Zofia, recalling that she severely damaged Zofia's arm during the confrontation. However, when she saw Zofia again yesterday, her arm was fully restored. Krishna is convinced there must be a healer in the slums powerful enough to regenerate limbs. And if that's the case, it would make sense for someone like that to have serious influence over the faction bosses. Krishna intends to continue her investigation the next morning, hoping to discover some clues about this supposed evil healer, but Zenos doesn't understand why she automatically assumes the healer would be evil. In fact, Krishna seems to harbor a very negative opinion of the entire slum, prompting Zenos to ask if she has a specific reason for feeling that way. Krishna admits she may have a biased perspective, but it stems from someone from the slums murdering her mother. Krishna's mother was a compassionate woman who genuinely wanted to help everyone she could. She frequently visited the slums and organized events to distribute food to those who couldn't afford to eat. But one day, she simply didn't return. Ever since then, Krishna lost the ability to laugh or even show a slight smile, which is one of the reasons people started calling her the Iron Rose. And according to the accounts of witnesses, Krishna's mother was murdered and robbed for her wedding ring, and learning this completely shattered Krishna. Her mother had saved countless lives from starvation, yet no one stepped forward to save her in her time of need. This tragic event motivated Krishna to join the Knight's Order and become an unstoppable hero who could deliver justice to the criminals living within the slums. The following day, Krishna leaves to continue her investigation, allowing Zenos to resume treating his patients. Zofia visits the clinic with a minor injury on her arm and asks Zenos to examine it. Zenos begins treating her but advises Zofia to be cautious since Krishna could return at any moment. And speaking of Krishna, she suddenly appears at the clinic to ask for directions after getting lost on her way out again. As soon as Krishna notices Zofia, she immediately draws her guns, prompting Zofia to retaliate by pulling out her knives, so a brief standoff ensues between them. Krishna then questions Zofia, asking if there's genuinely an evil healer assembling criminals to threaten innocent people. Zofia doesn't deny the existence of a healer, but insists that he definitely isn't evil. While Zofia herself is a thief and doesn't strictly follow the law, she knows firsthand that some among the nobility are guilty of far greater crimes. For example, Zofia is aware that Krishna is investigating the trafficking ring, and after conducting her own research, Zofia discovered that the mastermind behind it is actually an aristocrat. Initially, Krishna doesn't believe her, as the trafficking ring is known to operate primarily in the slums. But Zofia clarifies that this is merely a clever deception intended to mislead the Knight's Order from uncovering the true criminal behind it all. Krishna remains skeptical, but requests that Zofia reveal who is responsible for the kidnappings, prompting Zofia to name a man called Calendar. Krishna finds this difficult to accept, considering Calendar is widely recognized as a generous philanthropist who prides himself on educating orphan children, and thus could never be involved in child trafficking. Zofia expected that Krishna wouldn't trust her, given that Krishna sees everyone from the slums as criminals. However, the mediator has never treated them that way. Instead, he treats everyone fairly and consistently gives people second chances, unlike Krishna and her misguided version of justice. Krishna becomes furious when Zofia insults her concept of justice, and she's about to fire her gun, but Zenos steps in front of her, demanding that Krishna lower the damn weapon. Krishna orders Zenos to step aside, but he refuses, saying he can't allow harm to come to Zofia since she's his patient. He apologizes for not being upfront earlier, but he confesses that he's actually the mediator Krishna has been searching for. Krishna assumes Zenos is just lying to protect Zofia because there's no way he could possibly be the healing mediator. After all, he's already demonstrated mastery over defensive magic, and there's no way in hell he could also excel in healing magic. Zenos doesn't necessarily consider himself a master, but he's certain of his abilities in both healing and defensive magic, since both simply require him to enhance the body's natural processes. Krishna finds this entire explanation absurd and remains unconvinced that Zenos is the healer, although it's evident he's siding with Zofia. Out of respect for the hospitality Zenos provided her yesterday, Krishna decides to exit peacefully without engaging in conflict. As Krishna leaves, Lily notices she's heading towards the district inhabited by aristocrats, prompting Zenos to suddenly realize her destination. Krishna took Zofia's accusation against Calendar seriously, prompting her to visit his manor to investigate. Obviously, she can't directly confront him about the child trafficking allegations, so Krishna fabricates an excuse for her presence. She tells him that she's heard about a recent increase in theft in the area, and Calendar confirms he's been experiencing difficulties with the Lizardman gang lately. Krishna then informs him that she plans to boost security patrols in response. However, before implementing these patrols, she wishes to inspect Calendar's estate to gauge his current security measures. Calendar understands her reasoning and readily offers to guide her on a tour of his mansion. Krishna is then shown throughout the entire manor, and after the tour concludes, Calendar asks her opinion on his security setup. Krishna praises him for his meticulous approach to safeguarding the estate, but during her inspection, something odd catches her attention. She requests permission to use the restroom before departing, and Calendar sees no issue with this, so she slips away from his office. Given Calendar's high social standing, extensive security isn't unusual, but Krishna finds it peculiar that so much effort has been devoted to protecting the backyard area. Suspecting something might be hidden there, she peers over the wall and quickly notices a hidden entrance. Krishna cautiously makes her way down the passage, and to her shock, she realizes Zofia was telling the truth, that Calendar truly was behind all the kidnappings. But before Krishna has the chance to aid the captured children, Calendar sneaks up behind her, grabs the guns she left upstairs, and blows off her arm. He laughs at how effortlessly he managed to defeat a knight, taunting her for poking her nose where it didn't belong. Now, he simply needs to finish her off and resume his trafficking business. But just as he's about to make his next move, Zofia and Zenos arrive. Zenos had become concerned when he realized where Krishna was headed, so he asked Zofia to lead him there. Calendar is determined to leave no witnesses, so he switches Krishna's gun to lethal mode and shoots Zenos straight in the face. Yet, to Calendar's complete disbelief, Zenos remains unharmed, though he admits the lethal shots did sting quite a bit. Calendar panics, attempts to escape, but drops the gun in his frenzy, allowing Zenos to pick it up. Calendar immediately begins begging for mercy, and luckily for him, Zenos has a strict no-kill policy. However, Zenos doesn't have any rules against causing pain, so he switches the gun to non-lethal and fires directly at Calendar's head, knocking him out. He quickly moves to Krishna's side, but she weakly tells him it's pointless because her arm is gone, and a large portion of her stomach has been blown away. She's accepted her death, but Zenos reassures her she'll be alright, though he's definitely going to charge her heavily for his services, so she should brace herself for a damn expensive bill. Moments later, Krishna is fully healed. Astonished by Zenos' ability to instantly repair such critical injuries, she finally accepts that he was truthful about being the mediator, but her interest in arresting him has vanished entirely, as she now views him as a genuine hero. Zenos, however, doesn't consider himself a hero at all. He was simply a healer doing his job by ensuring nobody died. If anyone deserves to be called a hero, it's Krishna herself because she was the one who first took action for the children's sake. She might have been misguided occasionally, but deep down, she genuinely cares and wants to create a better world. Zofia and the lizard men then assist in freeing the children from the dungeon. But with the royal knights approaching fast, Zenos isn't interested in dealing with them, so he decides to leave with the others. However, before he departs, Krishna stops him, curious why he decided to save her despite her being an enemy at the time. Zenos simply turns around and replies that he wanted to ensure she pays her outstanding bills. She still owes him money for the night she spent at his clinic, and now there's the additional cost of healing. He expects full payment by the week's end. Krishna, amused by his ridiculous reasoning, laughs for the first time since the loss of her mother. The next day, we see Zenos and Lily walking side by side down the street, casually chatting about picking up some tea, when out of nowhere, Zenos catches sight of the old spot he used to call home back in the slums, and the sight pulls him straight into his memories. He'd been a dirt-poor orphan with nothing, no family, no future, only wasting his days just sitting in that filthy alley, doing nothing but barely scraping by. One day, Astan was wandering through the slums, trying to choose a child to kidnap, but thus far he's frustrated because none appear suitable enough to serve as human shields. At that moment, he notices Zenos and decides he's perfect, approaching and initiating a conversation with him. Essentially, Astan says to Zenos, "You're impoverished, jobless, and starving, so join me on an adventure." He speaks with a polite demeanor, infused with false kindness, leading Zenos to mistakenly think Astan is genuinely nice. Despite this, Zenos hesitated to accept because it's rare for slum dwellers to become adventurers. However, Astan assures him that as long as he possesses the skills, he can accomplish anything. Astan then asks Zenos if he has any particular skills, to which Zenos responds that he knows some healing magic. But Astan is highly skeptical, since mastering healing magic typically takes years of rigorous training at the Royal Academy, making it improbable for a random orphan to learn it independently. Nevertheless, whether Zenos truly knows healing magic or not doesn't matter to Astan because he intends to use Zenos merely as a distraction if anything goes awry. Once Zenos agrees to join him, Astan takes him into the forest. There, the pair confront a wolf monster. During the battle, Astan gets slightly injured, prompting Zenos to heal him using his magic. Then Astan charges the wolf, and Zenos employs his healing magic again to enhance Astan's speed, enabling Astan to decapitate the wolf effortlessly with a single strike. Astan, however, strangely fails to notice that his injuries healed mid-combat or that he suddenly moved faster at a crucial moment, leaving him convinced that Zenos is utterly useless. After several years of enduring this dynamic, Astan eventually expels Zenos from the party, and we know how Zenos has spent his time since then. However, Astan's group hasn't fared quite as well, because after removing Zenos, Astan and the remaining party members set out toward a cave for their next mission. This mission holds significant importance, as they intend to leverage it to curry favor with influential nobles within the kingdom. Though all of them resent the intense labor involved, Yuma then informs them that the quicker they finish their task, the quicker they can return to the inn and resume drinking. Andres feels thrilled because ladies always flock around them whenever they say they're members of the Golden Phoenix group. After all, their team is renowned for successfully finishing quests and defeating magical creatures without taking any damage. Right at that moment, they encounter the creatures they're here to defeat, so Astan unsheathes his blade and prepares to strike. He instructs Guile to cast protective magic on him while he rushes ahead, and Guile does precisely that. But even while Astan is battling the wolves, his arm still gets scorched. And at the same time out back, Yuma is being attacked by one of the wolves, so he's out of the picture for good. Astan shouts at Andres to quickly cast some offensive spells, but it takes too damn long to finish chanting the incantation, and he even gets blasted by a fireball mid-spell. Astan is stunned and questions whether his group has always been this damn incompetent, but it's evident they're not going to win this battle, so he commands everyone to withdraw immediately. Once they're out the hell, Astan questions his teammates why they're having difficulty against monsters that barely reach B rank, but Andres reminds him he wasn't particularly effective against the wolves either. Guile asks Astan if there's a chance Zenos had been truthful when he claimed he was healing them. But Astan finds it impossible since there's no way a lowly commoner like him could have possibly mastered healing magic. Still, to be cautious, Astan thinks it might be wise for their group to recruit a healer. Several days later, they go back to the cave after recruiting a healer, whose name is Human, but she informs Astan up front she's not skilled at battlefield healing. She typically provides healing services only in the capital, but she coincidentally possesses an adventurer's license, so she agreed to accompany them. Still, she wonders why the Golden Phoenix would even require a healer given their reputation for successfully completing missions without injury. But Astan refuses to explain what occurred, telling her instead to mind her own damn affairs. Guile then questions Human about whether Yuma will recover, as he was severely injured by the wolves last time. Human was the healer who treated him, so she's confident he'll survive. But considering how critical his wounds were, there's no possibility of him ever returning to adventuring. You'd assume Astan would show some sympathy toward a teammate who became permanently crippled, but he simply moves past it, stating Yuma wasn't valuable enough to keep around anyway. And if you are wondering why this quest holds such significance, a nobleman requested a scarf made from a fire fox's fur as a present for his daughter. If completing it places Astan in Lord Fennel's favor, he's prepared to put his life on the line for that scarf. Yet, barely 2 seconds afterward, the plan crumbles because the wolves launch an unexpected ambush. Astan quickly retaliates and tells Guile to apply defensive spells to everyone. But as Astan moves in to attack, he can't land a single blow against any of the wolves. The wolves then unleash 4 fireballs at him, and Astan manages to deflect 3. But the 4th fireball strikes Andres in the stomach, knocking him out immediately. Astan continues swinging fruitlessly at the wolves, but soon Human shouts that they must withdraw because Andres' condition is critical. Astan can't believe everything is collapsing yet again, and when they finally get outside, he snaps at Guile, demanding to know why he failed to shield Andres with defensive magic. However, Yuman points out that Guile's defensive spell was indeed effective, and without it, Andres would have been instantly killed by a blast of that magnitude. Astan impatiently demands that she heal Andres right away, but Yuman informs him that's impossible, as only top-tier healers or saints possess the capability to instantly heal such severe wounds without proper preparation. Unless they rush Andres to a medical facility immediately, he won't survive. Some time later, Astan speaks with Lord Fennel's servant, who informs him that Lord Fennel is extremely disappointed. Astan desperately asks for another opportunity, certain he can secure the fur for the scarf if given one more chance, but the nobleman's daughter's birthday has already passed, making the whole matter pointless. And the real reason behind Lord Fennel's dissatisfaction isn't merely that Golden Phoenix failed the quest. It's because Astan repeatedly promised he'd succeed. Had Astan simply informed Lord Fennel earlier that the mission couldn't be accomplished for any reason, the Lord would have understood and chosen a different gift for his daughter. But that's not what Astan did, so for a brief moment, Astan tries shifting the entire blame for this disaster onto Zenos. However, he soon recalls he never formally registered Zenos as part of the party, so officially speaking, Zenos was never recognized as a member, meaning he can't be held accountable for anything. Swallowing his pride, Astan bows his head low, forced to apologize for the entire fiasco, and he seethes inside, hating every second of having to lower himself before a servant. Astan then vows he'll find a way to make amends, but Lord Fennel's servant questions how exactly he'll accomplish that considering half his group is already nearly dead. Astan confidently replies that he intends to recruit replacements to offset their losses, and the next time Lord Fennel entrusts them with a task, he'll ensure its successful completion. Afterward, Lord Fennel's servant departs, though Guile asks Astan if making such promises is really a wise move. After all, they currently have no prospects on capable recruits, and there's no possible way for them to undertake missions with just 2 remaining members. Astan tells Guile there's no need for concern, as he already has something in mind. Even though Astan still doesn't believe Zenos holds much value, he can't deny the team functioned much better while Zenos was with them. So Astan plans to simply bring him back. He's convinced Zenos would jump at the chance to rejoin Golden Phoenix, despite how poorly he'd been treated previously. The following day, Astan and Guile enter the slums searching for Zenos. But since they have absolutely no damn idea where to begin, Astan suddenly gets a brilliant idea. He decides to employ the 3 faction bosses to help locate Zenos, confident they'll agree because low-class scum like them will do practically anything for cash. A short while later, he has a lizard man guide him to Zofia, saying he's interested in hiring her services. Zofia isn't particularly enthusiastic since this interferes with her daily clinic hours, but she's at least open to hearing out a paying customer. Astan introduces himself as the leader of Golden Phoenix, explaining to Zofia that he's searching for a man named Zenos, who arrived in the slums around 2 months prior. At first, Zofia can't believe what's being said, since Zenos had informed her all about how Astan kicked him out of Golden Phoenix, which had already seemed foolish. But she never imagined Astan would be stupid enough to go searching for Zenos afterward. She tells Astan to leave immediately, because Zenos has far more important things to occupy his time than dealing with him. And quite honestly, even looking at Astan makes her sick. Astan becomes offended, briefly thinking about attacking Zofia, but quickly realizes he'd get thoroughly beaten if he tried anything, so he decides to back down. After Zofia refuses to assist him, Astan decides to approach Linga's faction instead. But the moment she realizes who Astan is, she immediately tells him to leave. Astan is shocked to learn Linga also considers herself Zenos' friend, and just in case he's considering making trouble, Linga reminds Astan that if she wanted, she could easily kill him 3 times over before he even had a chance to blink. Astan then attempts approaching Loa for assistance, but like the others, she promptly tells him to go screw himself. She also threatens that if she ever hears he's been bothering Zenos, she'll personally crush his skull between her thighs. Astan and Guile immediately exit Loa's cave, and Astan struggles to believe that all the faction bosses care about Zenos this much. He tries convincing himself they must be referring to some other individual named Zenos, because there's absolutely no chance the Zenos he remembers could have such influence in this place. Speaking of Zenos, Guile coincidentally spots him walking along the street with Lily. Lily and Zenos just completed their shopping errands for the day and were preparing to return home when Astan suddenly calls out to Zenos. Zenos is startled to encounter Astan and Guile again, but he's not exactly thrilled to see them, so he begins walking away. Astan stops him and loudly announces that he specifically came here to welcome Zenos back into Golden Phoenix. But before Astan can even finish his damn sentence, Zenos flatly rejects his ass. Astan can't believe this rejection since he was sure Zenos would jump at the chance to return to their party. But Zenos begins listing every bit of mistreatment he endured under Astan, including the terrible conditions and insulting pay. There's literally zero incentive for Zenos to rejoin Golden Phoenix. But if Aston is truly desperate, Zenos suggests he could tag along for a few missions, provided he's available. However, Zenos refuses to continue working merely for recognition, so Aston would need to offer him fair payment this time. Zenos demands 50,000 for minor healing and 1 million for major healing services. In addition, Aston must pay separately for Zenos' defensive spells and buffs. But if Aston finds these terms unacceptable, there's nothing else to discuss, so Zenos once again begins walking away. Aston feels deeply insulted that Zenos dares to reject his offer, so he unsheathes his blade and attempts an attack. But before he can get anywhere close, he's blasted back by Krishna. She tells Aston that it's downright idiotic to launch an attack right in front of a royal knight. She had actually come here looking for Zenos herself, but since Aston just attempted an assault, she's now obligated to place him under arrest. However, Aston quickly points at Guile, claiming he's the one who forced him into it, then immediately flees like a coward because he definitely doesn't want his ass to end up imprisoned. After all that shit show, Zenos and Lily return home for the evening, and shortly afterward, Zofia, Linga, and Lo arrive. They inform Zenos that Aston attempted to hire them to track him down, and even though they all rejected his request, Zofia remains concerned that he might persistently keep coming after Zenos. If Aston decides to approach the unlawful underground guild, he might even manage to hire an assassin to go after Zenos purely out of resentment. However, hiring assassins typically requires substantial funds, and considering Aston was desperate enough to seek out Zenos personally rather than recruit additional party members, he's most likely broke. Despite this, Zofia is still uneasy, as she's heard unsettling rumors about a mysterious figure known as the Guide from the Underground Guild, who accepts assignments for free under specific circumstances. Thus, if Aston somehow convinces the Guide, it might spell serious danger for Zenos. Some time later, Zenos finds himself unable to sleep because of all the tension caused by encountering Aston again, prompting Carmilla to come downstairs to keep him company for some reason, since she's concerned about him. While she's there, Carmilla asks Zenos if it's actually true that he learned healing magic in the slums, prompting Zenos to explain that he initially tried resurrecting a corpse, after which healing magic simply came to him naturally. Carmilla remarks that resurrection magic is forbidden, but in Zenos' defense, he genuinely had no damn idea about the ban when he first experimented with it. On the topic of forbidden magic, Carmilla remembers something resembling artificial life from her own lifetime. It occurred during the Demon Lord's reign, and he frequently waged war using golems animated by forbidden spells. Right at that moment, Zenos hears chaos erupting outside, so Carmilla volunteers to investigate, and to her shock, she witnesses a significant portion of the slums engulfed in flames as a rampaging golem wreaks havoc. Turns out Aston really was that vindictive because he actually tried to get Zenos killed, but the problem was that Aston was dead broke and couldn't afford a legit assassin, so someone steered him toward the Guide. The Guide said he'd maybe consider doing it for nothing, but only after hearing the full situation to judge if it was even worth his attention. Aston laid everything out, ranting in detail about what happened, and the Guide couldn't stop laughing. Aston was a pathetic, self-centered clown, and the whole thing was just sad. But still, the idea of targeting Zenos sounded like fun, and it gave the Guide a perfect excuse to test out one of his newest little creations. Back in the present, Zenos and Carmilla had just made it into the town, and up close, the scene looked way worse than they expected. Buildings were trashed, streets torn apart. Then not long after, Linga, Lo, and Zofia showed up, asking Zenos for help because the golem had seriously injured a lot of their people. Zenos asked if they had any clue where it came from, but they were just as lost. The only thing they'd seen was the golem coming from the far end of the slums, but that didn't explain anything. Hearing that made Zenos uneasy. If the creatures were coming from deep in the slums, the underground guild might have a hand in this mess. But now wasn't the time to speculate. So he turned to the others and told them to start gathering all the wounded in one place so he could begin healing. And once he was done with that, he swore he'd make whoever caused this disaster pay for it. Meanwhile, the Guide was observing the devastation from a comfortable distance, feeling quite pleased with the golem's capabilities, though he noted its speed left something to be desired. Still, for a first test run, it was more than capable of carrying out the mission. He didn't know much about Zenos yet, but he was itching to see how the guy would react once his friends started dropping one after another right in front of him. Back inside the city, Linga, Lo, and Zofia rounded up their forces, ordering them to locate all survivors and bring them straight to Zenos. Once they had everyone accounted for, Zenos got ready to cast. But before he did, he warned Carmilla to step back to avoid being affected by the casting. He then fired off high heel across the entire zone, and within moments, people who were on the brink of death were back on their feet, and Zenos told them to evacuate the area as fast as they could. He then moved around personally, healing anyone who hadn't been caught in the main cast range. And yeah, he was pissed. Not only had he been dragged out of bed in the middle of the night, but he also had to heal literal crowds of injured people. And there wasn't even a guarantee he was getting paid for this crap. But one thing was certain, that whoever controlled that golem was going to answer for this. But so far, they still had no clue who was behind it, or why the attack was even carried out. Back with the guide, and he's honestly shocked that Zenos managed to save every single injured person, because he was almost certain that at least a handful would die in the chaos. Just by watching, it was obvious that Zenos was a top-tier healer. But even with all that power, unless he shuts down the golem, the destruction's just going to keep piling up. Zenos had just wrapped up healing the wounded, and with the area finally cleared out, the golem was still out there wrecking everything in sight. Zenos looked at Carmilla and asked if there was even a small chance the thing would get bored and wander off. But she shot that down immediately. Golems are built to follow commands until the task is finished, and based on what they'd seen, this one had been told to tear the slums apart. It wasn't going to stop until everything was gone. What made it even worse was the fact that high-grade monostones, the kind needed to make golem cores, were supposed to have been completely wiped out during the Great War. So by all logic, nobody should have access to something that rare anymore. Zenos had really been hoping to catch a break, but clearly that wasn't happening. He couldn't just stand around and let this thing keep trashing the place. So he'd have to take care of it now before the damage got any worse. Then the trio from Totally Spies stepped forward and offered to join him in the fight. But Zenos asked if they were sure, because he couldn't promise he'd be able to heal them mid-battle if things went sideways. They understood the risks, but they weren't backing down. This was their home too, and they weren't about to watch it get flattened. Zenos was glad to have them on board, but they couldn't charge in without a plan, so he turned to Carmilla and asked if she knew how to bring a golem down. She told him that unless they destroyed the monostone powering the core, the damn thing would just keep getting back up no matter how much damage it took. That was bad news for Zenos, because he'd been hoping to sell the golem core later and make a little extra cash. But there was no other option. So he gave the order, hit the thing with everything they had, and he'd handle the support. So the girls didn't waste a second and rushed in. As they advanced, Zenos buffed them with an agility spell to boost their movement speed. And right before they engaged, he followed up with a strength enchantment. And that gave them just enough raw power to blow out one of the golem's legs completely. The heavy chunk of enchanted stone shattered, and the golem lost its balance, slamming into the ground. But the win didn't last, because the moment it hit the dirt, its core lit up, and before anyone could even take a breath, the golem started regenerating again. The golem then backhands Linga so hard that she gets launched straight through 3 buildings before crashing to a stop. Realistically, she should have had every bone in her body broken from that hit. But thanks to Zenos' magic, she walked away without a scratch. It had been a long time since Zenos had been in an actual fight, so he was a bit out of shape, but that was quickly wearing off. He just had to remember 2 things. First, if he strayed too far from the group, his enhancement spells wouldn't reach them. Second, since healing, speed, and power buffs each had a different cast sequence, he couldn't activate them all together, so he'd need to rotate them in real time based on the flow of combat. After a few minutes, Zenos picked up on the fact that the golem didn't regenerate instantly. If they hit it hard enough all at once, it would stay down, at least for a bit. He then shouted for the girls to break both its legs, and once they did, the thing started toppling over again, but just as it was falling, something went wrong. Zofia suddenly yelled that there was a kid trapped inside one of the nearby houses, and the golem was going to crush her. Zenos tried to reach her, but she was too far. He couldn't throw a protection spell across that distance in time, so he sprinted toward her, hoping to pull her out, but he didn't make it, and the girl should have been dead. But then somehow, the golem stopped itself mid-fall and avoided hitting her. That wasn't normal, because golems weren't built to care, and according to Carmilla, they didn't have the cognitive ability to protect people. So something was clearly off about this one. Zenos scanned the construct, and there it was. Astan was trapped inside. The guide was genuinely caught off guard by how fast Zenos put the pieces together. Still, he didn't care, because Zenos knowing wouldn't change a damn thing. The monocrystal he'd used was flawed. It couldn't make a standard golem on its own, so he used a human as the core instead, and Astan had been the perfect lab rat. The guide lured him in, planted the crystal in his chest, and used him to generate a functioning golem core. And from that point on, Astan and the golem became permanently fused. Now, the guide was watching closely, curious to see how Zenos would react. After saving all those lives, would he really be able to kill someone? Zenos took a long breath, then calmly told the others to clear the battlefield. The girls hesitated because they didn't understand why Zenos wanted them to back off when they were seconds away from finishing the fight. But now that Zenos knew what was truly happening, he realized this wasn't something they could handle together, and it was something only he could face. Although they didn't grasp the full situation, they trusted Zenos' judgment, and without question, they withdrew from the field, giving him the space he needed. Once the others had cleared the area, Zenos faced Astan and said it was time to end this, once and for all. Their whole connection started when Astan picked him up out of the slums, but even back then, it was all self-serving. Still, the moment he saved that little girl, something shifted. Zenos remembered what Guile had once told him. Astan's obsession with wealth and power stemmed from a tragic past. When Astan was a kid, his little sister died because he didn't have enough coins to pay a healer, and since then, he'd been chasing money and control like a man possessed. That girl must have reminded him of his sister, which is probably why he instinctively intervened. It doesn't make up for all the crap Astan's pulled, but it makes Zenos wonder, maybe there's still a sliver of humanity buried in there somewhere. But right now, Astan was out of his damn mind, and Zenos didn't have time to figure out if he could be saved, so he pulled out his scalpel. Astan then tried to crush him on the spot, but Zenos dodged and morphed the scalpel into a blade, slicing clean through both of Astan's arms. He then leapt into the air and tore open the golem's chest, exposing Astan's real body. He hated doing this, but he had to make sure Astan couldn't cause any more chaos, so he slashed him across the torso. The guide watched in silence, genuinely surprised that Zenos had gone through with it so decisively. But then again, based on what he'd heard, Astan had treated Zenos like crap for years, so maybe this was personal or even revenge. But that wasn't it, because what Zenos was actually doing was way more precise. He was targeting only the parts of Astan that refused to the mana core. He was surgically severing them, not killing. And once those parts were cut, Zenos moved in and started healing Astan's body. The guide was stunned because pulling off something like this took ridiculous precision and focus. And the guy had just healed a whole damn city not 10 minutes ago. Zenos himself didn't even care that much if Astan lived or died, he wouldn't lose sleep either way. But somebody had to pay for the destruction, and he knew damn well Astan was too broke to pay for the damages himself. So he refused to let him die, not until he spilled the name of the person who created the golem. And even if Astan was piece of shit, Zenos couldn't ignore the fact that if he hadn't received that severance coin, he never would have been able to save Lily, and his clinic wouldn't exist today. And more importantly, Zenos had made an oath to save as many lives as he could, and that oath extended even to Astan. Zenos then raised his blade one last time and brought it down on the mana crystal, shattering it completely and freeing Astan from the golem once and for all. Things finally calmed down after all the chaos, and once Astan came to, the full weight of everything hit him. For the first time, he really understood how insane Zenos' abilities were. While trapped inside the golem, Astan had stayed partially conscious, just enough to witness Zenos coordinating the leaders mid-fight like some kind of battlefield tactician. That's when it hit him. Zenos must have been doing the same damn thing back when he was part of Astan's old party. Getting turned into a puppet and used like trash made Astan realize just how much of an asshole he'd been all along. He knew no apology in the world could erase the crap he pulled, but still he had to try. Zenos, however, wasn't having it. He couldn't stand watching Astan stutter out half-baked regrets. He told him to lift his head, not because he forgave him, but because he wanted to land one clean hit before heading home. He'd been dying to clock Astan in the face for years now, and knocking out a half-conscious guy just wouldn't have felt satisfying. But that he was awake, though there was nothing stopping him. So Zenos quietly cast a 10x strength buff, stepped forward slowly like a man walking toward destiny, and unleashed the most cathartic punch of his entire life. Astan went down cold, and a few hours later, Astan woke up with a pounding headache and Krishna standing over him. She calmly informed him that she'd already bumped into Zenos earlier, so she had a pretty good idea of how everything went down. Then she added that he was damn lucky no one died, or he'd be staring down murder charges right now. That said, she was still placing him under arrest for a whole list of things: property damage, assault, and somehow, public indecency. Because apparently Zenos' punch had knocked every last piece of clothing clean off his body. And she also mentioned that Zenos left a few parting words for him. The first message, Zenos had taken Astan's sword while he was unconscious. It was a well-crafted blade, and selling it should be enough to cover all the damages he caused. Then Krishna told him there was one more message and instructed Astan to look at his hand. And when he opened it, he saw a single gold coin, Zenos' idea of severance pay, so that was it. And with that coin, Zenos never wanted to see or hear from him ever again. Astan sat there, eyes to the ground, feeling completely gutted. He knew damn well he deserved it, but now he really had nothing left. Then we see that after everything that went down, Zenos could barely stand. His legs were jelly, and he was clearly running on fumes. The others offered to carry him home, but he insisted they didn't have to. He figured they were just as wiped as he was. Still, the girls didn't listen. After all the times Zenos had carried them, literally and figuratively, it was their turn to return the favor. Meanwhile, back at the clinic, Carmilla had already filled Lily in on everything that had happened. So when Zenos finally arrived home, Lily greeted him warmly and asked if he'd like a cup of warm tea. Then Krishna comes in and says that she threw everything she's got into tracking down whoever was responsible for the golem incident. But she's hit a dead end. The only lead she's managed to uncover is that he is someone known as the Guide, and from what she's gathered, the guy's so unreachable, she tried retracing Astan's steps to the spot where they supposedly met. But when she arrived, the whole area had already been wiped clean, like it never even existed. Zofia also tried asking around the underground guilds, and from what little she picked up, the Guide is only recently started making appearances there. Besides that, nobody has a clue who he is, so interrogating the locals won't get them anywhere. Krishna says she's classifying the Guide as a high priority threat, but judging by how carefully he covered his tracks, she doubts he'll be showing his face again anytime soon. That said, Zofia isn't buying it because people like him don't just vanish unless they've got something massive cooking behind the scenes. And if that's true, they'd better be ready for whatever hell he's planning to unleash next. Krishna tells her to quit jumping to conclusions since they don't have solid evidence that the guy will come back. But Zofia fires right back, pointing out that Krishna was doing the exact same thing a minute ago. Zenos sighs and tells both of them to chill before they start another argument, then asks Krishna why she's sitting way over at the opposite end of the room from everyone else. Because trying to hold a conversation like this is a nightmare? Krishna says that while she appreciates Zofia's help during the golem incident, she can't be seen casually hanging out with demi-humans like this, not while she's still a royal knight. Zenos can already tell this is about to spiral, and he wants none of it. So he shoves the whole group out the door and tells them not to come back today unless they're bleeding. Once everyone's gone, Zenos drops into his seat and tries to unwind, but then Lily shyly walks over and says she's got an idea. She knows he must be wiped out after burning so much mana during the golem fight, and she's just about to suggest going to a hot spring together when suddenly Zofia barges back in and beats her to it, loudly inviting Zenos to join her for a hot spring trip to cool off. Zenos figures it might be a nice way to switch things up from his usual schedule, so he agrees, and Zofia leaves with a big grin on her face, and Lily is left speechless. Not long after that, Linga shows up. She glances around quickly to make sure the coast is clear, then leans in and asks Zenos if he wants to go hit up the hot spring with her. Zenos is still very much down for the hot spring idea, but he can't really say yes because Zofia already asked him first. But before he can even explain, Linga just smiles and says she'll catch him there, then heads out. Moments after that, Lo arrives, and Zenos doesn't even need her to speak because he already knows exactly what she's about to say. Sure enough, she came to ask him to go to the hot spring too. And when Zenos reacts like he saw it coming, Lo takes it as confirmation and cheerfully says she'll see him there. Then a little while after that, the exact same damn thing happens with Krishna. By this point, Zenos is seriously starting to wonder what the hell is going on, and why everyone is suddenly acting like the hot spring is some kind of romantic battlefield. That's when he remembers Lily was about to ask something earlier before the others barged in. But now she just stands there quietly, clearly embarrassed, and Zenos doesn't push it. She doesn't say a word, but it's obvious she was going to invite him too. Meanwhile, Carmilla heard everything from the other room. She's cracking up, watching Lily lose her shot after working up all that courage. Zenos, of course, has no clue what she's laughing about. Still, Carmilla figures things are bound to get fun over at the hot spring, and she's not about to miss out. It's been a long time since she got to relax at one anyway, so she announces she's coming too. Sometime later, Zenos is finally chilling in the bath when Zofia struts in. He immediately tells her she's in the wrong spot, and this is the men's side. But Zofia waves him off and says it's fine. She hung a fake out-of-order sign outside, so they shouldn't be interrupted. Zofia came in ready to seduce him, no shame about it. But instead of going full force, she decides to play it casual and strike up some small talk while they sit in the water. She mentions how people keep saying she's different ever since she met Zenos, and he admits it's true. She's way less hostile than she used to be. Still, that doesn't change the fact that she's way too close for comfort right now. Zofia was hoping to catch him off guard and slide right into his arms, but Zenos notices, so she gets impatient and tries to wriggle her way in. Just then, Linga barges in and calls her out for jumping the line, accusing her of sneaking in just to get alone time with Zenos. But let's be real, Linga's here for the same thing. She fakes being lightheaded and starts stumbling toward Zenos like she's about to pass out right into his arms. But Zofia isn't having it and grabs Linga mid-fall, and the two immediately start grappling like a pair of jealous cats. Right in the middle of that chaos, Lo suddenly rises out of the water like some kind of battle spirit and demands to be part of whatever madness is going on. Zenos stares at her and asks what the hell she's doing here, and more importantly, why she's not wearing a towel. Lo casually replies that she's been lurking under the water this whole time, just waiting for the perfect chance to be alone with him, and as for the lack of clothes, she figured she'd give Zenos a full display of her athletic figure and asks him straight up what he thinks. Zenos squints, but the light behind her makes it impossible to see much. Not that it matters because the entire situation is insane. He just sits there, silently praying that they'll burn off all their energy fighting and leave him in peace. But then of course, Krishna storms in next, furious and yelling at everyone for turning the men's bath into a circus. The others immediately clap back, pointing out that Krishna has no room to talk when she clearly showed up for the same reason. Krishna insists that's not the point, but now all four of them are arguing and fighting over Zenos, and his patience is shot. He finally snaps and shouts for all of them to get lost and head back to the women's bath. It's so loud that Yumin hears him from the other side. She's soaking in the women's bath and can't believe how bold some girls are sneaking into the guys' side like that. But all she can do is hope their drama doesn't mess up her vacation. A minute later, the girls come trudging back into the women's bath, all bummed out that Zenos turned them down, but surprisingly, they're not mad at each other. They actually seem to be bonding. Yumin is genuinely taken aback because it's not every day you see a human, a werewolf, an ogre, and a lizard girl all chilling together like old friends. Later that evening, after everyone's had their fill of steam, they all head out to enjoy a big post-bath meal together. Krishna's still trying to act like she's not part of this mess, pretending she's not friends with anyone. But even she can't resist sneaking glances at the fun and laughing under her breath. Not long after, Zenos tucks Lily in for the night and steps out onto the balcony, where Carmilla is waiting. She asks if he's finally starting to enjoy the trip, and Zenos admits the dinner was nice. Well, it was nice until people started getting hammered and fighting over who got to sit in his lap. Carmilla cracks up and tells him to savor the calm while he can, because things are bound to get chaotic again soon. Zenos tells her to quit tempting fate and jinxing him, but Carmilla just shrugs because a wraith's gut feeling rarely misses heavy. That reminds Zenos that he's pretty sure wraiths can't hang around under the sun for long. So how the hell did Carmilla even get here? She smirks and points at a staff resting against the wall. Apparently, she just possessed that thing and asked Lily to bring it along. Wraiths can only inhabit items they were connected to in life, so Zenos naturally asks what she was doing before she died. But Carmilla still doesn't like opening up about her past. She changes the subject, picks up a bottle, and offers to pour him a drink instead. The next day, a loud blast goes off in the kitchen, and Yumin immediately rushes over to see what's going on. One of the innkeepers is sprawled out on the ground. Apparently, he was cooking breakfast when the magic firestones inside the stove erupted, and he took the full hit. His arms in rough shape, burned up pretty badly. Yumin steps in right away, saying she's a healer and will do what she can. She manages to stabilize him, but even she admits she's nowhere near good enough to fix the damage completely. His arm's likely beyond saving, and she insists he needs to be taken to the nearest royal hospital as fast as possible, though even then he probably won't regain full use of it. Right then, Zenos shows up to check what the fuss is about. Yumin calls out to him, asking for a little assistance moving the injured man to hospital. But from where Zenos is standing, the guy's condition isn't actually that serious. He figures it's not worth the trip to the hospital and casually starts walking away. Before leaving though, and as a small gesture of thanks for the hospitality during their stay at the springs, Zenos quietly heals the man. No charge, no fuss, just like that. He walks off with Lily, and from Yumin's point of view, it looks like he completely ignored the man and just dipped without helping. She's about to call him out for it, until she glances down and sees the man's injuries are totally gone. For a split second, she wonders if maybe her own healing did more than she thought. But no, she knows better. Her skill level isn't anywhere near high enough to pull something like that off. Only top-tier magic users, saints, or legendary healers can perform that kind of miracle. And that's when it clicks. Zenos has to be an elite-level healer. She immediately heads back to report this to her superior, and Bernardo is floored to hear there's a healer of that caliber just wandering around unnoticed. If what Yumin says is true, the kingdom would definitely want someone like that working for them. But tracking him down will be tricky, since Yumin barely remembers any details, just that he had black hair. Bernardo shrugs it off at first, figuring that if Zenos healed someone without asking for a single coin, then he's probably a decent guy, so there is no need to worry too much about him. That is, until Yumin casually mentions that Zenos was also wearing a black overcoat, so that changes everything. Bernardo suddenly reconsiders and decides it is worth trying to find this guy after all. Yumin's cool with the idea, but asks how he plans to pull it off, so he takes a moment to think it through. If Zenos has no official registry or license, that must mean he's unregistered and probably working somewhere deep within the slums, which works just fine, because Bernardo already has the perfect plan to smoke him out. Later that afternoon, Zahn barges into Zenos' clinic, dragging a half-conscious Bernardo behind him and frantically asks for help. He doesn't know who this guy is, but he suddenly started coughing up blood and collapsed, so Zahn brought him straight here. Zenos quickly warns everyone to keep their distance, just in case it's contagious, and begins a quick diagnostic scan. What he sees isn't pretty because the man's lungs are wrecked, and it reminds Zenos of the symptoms seen in red lung syndrome. So he tells Lily to back off just to be safe. That disease wiped out tons of people back in the day, and it spread fast, but it was supposed to be extinct after the cure was created. So Zenos has no clue how this guy caught it. Suddenly, Bernardo sits up, completely alert, and casually compliments Zenos on how fast he nailed the diagnosis. He introduces himself as a senior healer from the Royal Hospital, although he admits he's not exactly known for his healing magic skills. Right then, Yuman rushes into the room, panicking, and starts scolding Bernardo for doing something as reckless as faking a deadly illness just to meet Zenos. But Bernardo insists he had no other option if he wanted to see him face to face. And besides, the fake illness is starting to seriously suck. He pulls out a vial from his coat and downs the contents, explaining that it's an antidote. He had taken a self-engineered drug earlier that mimicked the symptoms of red lung, knowing it would prompt the locals to bring him straight to Zenos' door. But it's fine now because he's already neutralized the effects. Zenos asks why he even has something like that, and Bernardo says he made it years ago when he was experimenting with red lung strains during the vaccine trials. Hearing this, Zenos immediately realizes that who he's talking to is the doctor responsible for developing the red lung cure, the same one who earned the elite healer title for saving thousands. That aside, Bernardo explains the real reason he wanted to find Zenos was because the way he was described, especially the black coat, because it's reminded him of someone he once knew. He asks where Zenos got it, and Zenos tells him it belonged to his teacher, though he doesn't know where his teacher is now. Moving forward, Bernardo says he's here to offer Zenos a spot working at the Royal Hospital. There's a tricky situation developing, and he could really use someone with Zenos' level of expertise. But then the girls show up, clearly having heard there was some sketchy stranger bothering him, and they're ready to throw hands if needed. Bernardo calmly reassures them that he didn't come here to drag Zenos off against his will. He just wants to extend an offer, plain and simple, and Zenos seems fine with the idea. Zofia gives him a look and asks if he's really going through with it, but Zenos nods and says it's the right move. Now that the Royal Hospital knows about his little underground clinic, it's better to have someone like Bernardo on his side. Plus, when red lung was still spreading, Bernardo personally made sure to deliver free doses of the vaccine to the slums, and that act makes him a good person. So Zenos sees him as someone worth trusting. The next day, as part of the arrangement, Zenos joins Bernardo and Yuman on a trip to the Royal Hospital, and he's honestly taken aback by how massive the Royal Hospital is. After winding through the halls, they arrive at Bernardo's office, and once Zenos gets comfortable, Bernardo wastes no time and starts explaining the job he's got lined up for him. Apparently, there's been a recent wave of disappearances, and he wants Zenos to look into it. Zenos doesn't have a problem taking the job, but he points out that reconnaissance isn't really his strong suit. So he asks Bernardo if he's sure he wants someone like him handling this kind of work. Bernardo explains that, as a newly appointed member of the Royal Hospital, Zenos will have access to several specialized programs, so gathering intel should be relatively easy. Still, Zenos is worried that if he attracts too much attention, someone might eventually uncover his identity. Bernardo tells him not to stress about it, because he's already built a backstory for Zenos. From now on, if anyone asks, Zenos has just returned from studying abroad. Zenos isn't totally convinced that will fly, especially with other skilled healers around. But Bernardo says as long as he's vouching for him, no one's going to dig any deeper. After that, Yuman escorts Zenos to the hospital dorms where he'll be staying for the next few weeks, and to his surprise, he finds Lily already waiting for him. He immediately asks what she's doing here, and Yuman explains that Bernardo signed off on the paperwork to let Lily move in. According to hospital policy, healers are allowed to live with family members or spouses, so Lily teases that this makes her Zenos' wife now. But in truth, Yuman just listed her as Zenos' younger sister. She's the one who pushed for Lily to come here in the first place, since she figured Zenos would be more comfortable having someone familiar nearby, and honestly, he was nervous about leaving Lily behind, so he appreciates the gesture. Then, Yuman steps out to give Zenos time to settle in, but right after she leaves, Carmilla appears as well. Zenos understands why Lily's here, but he can't for the life of him figure out why Carmilla would come all the way to the capital. Not that she has much of a reason, she just enjoys messing with Zenos, since crazy things tend to happen whenever he's around. Zenos points out that with all the healers in this building, she's risking getting exorcised if anyone spots her. But Carmilla doesn't seem even a little concerned because aside from Zenos, there really aren't many healers here powerful enough to exorcise her anyway. A little later, Zenos is sitting in the cafeteria with Yuman, and she asks how he's settling into the new place so far. Zenos says it's not too bad, but things are about to get hectic, and he still has no clue how to go about getting an official healing license. Yuman says she can walk him through the process since she knows how it works. First, you have to pass a healer aptitude test. If you do, you get accepted into the Royal Healing Academy. From there, it's years of brutal studying, and if you survive that shit, you can take the final exam to earn your healer license. That sounds like a nightmare, so Zenos can't believe there are people actually willing to go through all that. But Yuman says that's just the beginning. Once you're licensed, you'll need to take another round of exams if you want to become an adventurer or work under military contracts. There are even more requirements if you want to move up through the healer ranks. Most folks in this facility are here to do research or level up their academic standing. But all of it just sounds like way too much for Zenos. He cuts her off and asks her to just skip to the part about the missing people. Yuman explains that one of the people who vanished was named Afreed, and he was a top-level healer and a researcher. The guy was known for being gentle and brilliant when it came to medicine, and even Bernardo told her that Afreed played a big role in developing the cure for the red lung disease. Zenos thinks Afreed sounds like someone worth saving, but he still doesn't know much about the situation, so he asks if there are any leads. Right then, the cafeteria doors swing open and Goldrin walks in. Zenos asks who that guy is, and Yuman tells him that's the vice director of the Royal Hospital, also a Class 7 advanced healer. Zenos has no idea what Class 7 means, so Yuman breaks it down. Healers are ranked in 3 tiers, beginner, advanced, and elite, and each tier has 7 levels. So a level 7 advanced healer is the highest point you can reach before hitting elite status. In short, Goldrin's a big deal around here, and apparently, he's aiming to become the hospital's next director. The current director is barely around anymore because he's ancient, so Goldrin basically runs the place now. But under his leadership, things have shifted a lot, but not necessarily for the better. According to Yuman, the wealthy get VIP treatment whenever they fall ill, while the poor are lucky to leave with an ice pack and a cheap sticker. Goldrin doesn't even bother improving his healing abilities anymore, and word going around is that he bought his way up to level 7. Zenos has a pretty solid grasp of what kind of guy Goldrin is, and honestly, he'd prefer to stay far away from him. But dodging him isn't really an option, since Yuman believes Goldrin might actually be involved in Alfred's disappearance. Goldrin's known for pulling in every skilled healer he can find to boost his image, and Alfred was one of those standout talents. Zenos asks if Goldrin has ever made a public statement about Alfred vanishing, but apparently, he denied having anything to do with it. Zenos gets what needs to be done, but the question is, how the hell is he supposed to get close to someone that high up the ladder? But Yuman says not to stress about it. If Zenos shows off his insane healing skills during one of the hospital's programs, then Goldrin's bound to notice him sooner or later. Zenos knows he's good, but he's never actually gone head-to-head with other healers before, so he has no idea how he stacks up, but he's willing to give it a shot. Right then, one of Yuman's colleagues called Crescent strolls over and asks why she's hiding out in the corner without him. Yuman tells him she's allowed to eat wherever she wants, but Crescent takes it the wrong way and assumes she's just teasing him. Then he notices Zenos and realizes he's the guy backed by an elite healer, which makes him jealous, but instead of starting something, he just throws a passive-aggressive jab, telling Zenos not to embarrass his sponsor, and walks off. Zenos turns to Yuman, asking what that was about. She explains that Crescent is a classmate of hers and used to be decent, but ever since Goldrin scouted him, his ego's been out of control. Zenos then thinks back to his early days. Back when he was still a kid, he found a corpse in an alley and started practicing his magic on it, hoping to bring it back. But just as he was about to raise the dead, his soon-to-be teacher smacked him across the head. The guy told him not to waste his talent on corpses and to learn how to help the living instead. And that was the day his life shifted. The man took Zenos in and started teaching him healing magic, alongside another student named Veritra. In just 1 year, both of them were already skilled enough to treat serious wounds. But even then, their teacher warned them, healing a few cuts and bruises is just beginner-level work. You're still a third-rate healer until you learn what healing really means. Back in the present, Zenos is sitting in on his very first lecture at the academy, and the topic for the day just so happens to be undead creatures. As the professor dives into the lesson, Zenos is kind of impressed, not because he's learning anything new, since he picked all this up back during his adventuring days, but the way the material is being broken down makes it easy, even for someone without field experience to follow. The instructor then opens the floor for questions, and one of the students raises a hand to ask about wraiths. Unfortunately, the professor doesn't have much to offer on the topic. All he really says is that wraiths sit at the top of the undead hierarchy. Encounters with them are rare, and in most cases, they end with the entire adventurer party getting wiped out. His advice is to run, especially if the wraith is capable of speech. That level of intellect usually means you're dealing with something terrifyingly strong. Zenos is kind of thrown off by that, considering he literally has a talking wraith living at home with Lily. He never realized Carmilla was that dangerous, but yeah, he's not about to say anything and cause a panic. The professor then asks if anyone's actually gone up against the undead before. The first to jump up is of course Crescent. He introduces himself with way too much flair and brags about how he used to be an adventurer and has taken out about 30 ghosts. That gets the class excited, so they all start clapping and hyping him up, which just feeds his ego. Then he notices Zenos isn't clapping and decides to target him, asking how many ghosts he's exorcised. Zenos could easily take on 50 in one go if he really pushed himself, but he doesn't want to draw attention, so he casually says he's handled 30 before. Crescent immediately calls BS, but Zenos holds his ground, clarifying that yeah, he's fought 30 ghosts at once, and the room goes dead silent. The others are in shock, trying to process what he just said. Someone asks him how the hell that's even possible, and Zenos explains that he once wandered into a haunted labyrinth and got swarmed, so he just spammed healing spells until everything was wiped out. That's when the class realizes he's talking about the Garmenton Labyrinth, a place so dangerous that even gold-class adventurers usually avoid it, so the room goes nuts. Everyone's seriously impressed, except for Crescent, who just sulks in disbelief, still convinced Zenos is lying because there's no way he got upstaged like that. The focus of the next lecture is on magic circles, and Crescent deliberately picks the seat right next to Zenos, determined to prove he's better. Zenos never really cared much for magic circles and always thought they were kind of pointless, but he still has to sit through the class. The professor draws one on the board and then asks if anyone wants to volunteer and recreate it in front of everyone. Crescent shoots his hand up and walks confidently to the front, clearly trying to show off. He draws a perfect magic circle for a basic healing spell, and the professor praises his precision. Then Crescent grins and tells the professor that Zenos would also like to give it a shot. Zenos never planned to participate, but now he's been dragged into it. Like he said before, magic circles were never something he paid much attention to, but he does remember one weird circle his master showed him years ago. So, he walks up and draws it. Crescent starts laughing because the circle looks nothing like what's in the textbooks. But when the professor sees it, he stops cold, completely stunned. What Zenos drew isn't just basic healing. It resembles a regeneration circle, but it's different. Zenos confirms that it is a regen-type circle, but it's an odd one. If someone's missing several fingers, this spell will randomly grow one back. It's overly complex and burns through a ton of mana, way more than most healers could ever handle. But Zenos activates it with ease, even admitting it's kind of useless to him since he can grow fingers back faster with his own methods. The professor quickly realizes Zenos isn't just talented, he's on another level. He immediately invites him to join his research group, but Zenos respectfully declines. Meanwhile, Crescent is sitting there seething from all the attention Zenos just stole from him. Later that same day, word about this gifted student reaches Goldrin. Supposedly, he's strong enough to wipe out 30 ghosts in one go, but Goldrin doesn't have time for rumors. Then another staff member rushes in with news that several undead have been spotted around the cemetery. That gives Goldrin an idea. He'll send Zenos to deal with it, and if the kid really is that good, then maybe he'll consider bringing him in. That night, Zenos is sent out with a squad of students for an exorcism mission, Crescent included. Crescent takes charge, leading the others in, but they end up surrounded fast, and Crescent starts to lose it. Just as things are about to go sideways, Zenos casts a powerful healing spell and wipes out every ghost in an instant. Zenos tells everyone they did a solid job dragging the ghosts out so he could finish them off. But before he even wraps up his sentence, Crescent cuts in and claims credit for the powerful heal spell. The rest of the students are clueless about what really happened, so they believe him when he says he's the one who saved the day. He even tells them to go brag to their professors about how amazing he is. Then he strolls over to Zenos and flat out says he's never going to acknowledge his skills. Zenos honestly couldn't care less about Crescent's desperate need for attention. But if Crescent really wants to be the hero, he shouldn't leave just yet because the real threat hasn't even shown up. Crescent has no idea what the hell Zenos is talking about. But a few seconds later, the ground tears open and a massive zombie king climbs out. The students are in disbelief that something this dangerous actually appeared, but they're still not too worried. After all, they figure Crescent will handle it. And he's going to be doing it alone, because there's no way any of them are going near that damn thing. Human and Zenos could step in, but they'd rather not get in Crescent's spotlight. So, they decide to just sit back and see how things play out. To give him some credit, Crescent does make an attempt. He tries blasting the zombie king with his strongest heal, but it barely makes a dent. There's no way he can win this fight, but his pride won't let him back down, so he just keeps running in circles trying not to get flattened. While all this chaos is happening, Human tells Zenos that powerful undead tend to draw in weaker ones, so chances are, the ghosts from earlier were just following the zombie king's lead, but Zenos feels like there's something more going on here. Anyway, Crescent is getting smacked around pretty hard now, and Zenos thinks it's time to jump in. But Human stops him for a moment. She still cares about Crescent, but she wants him to learn a hard lesson first. Crescent's been holding his own by spamming heal spells every time he slams into a wall, but eventually the zombie catches him. and just when it's about to eat him, Zenos steps in. He gets ready to use one of his best spells, and when it's charged, he fires off Mega Heal. A blinding light floods the battlefield, and a surge of pure healing energy scorches the decaying monster down to nothing. And now that the Zombie King is reduced to dust, the job is finally done. But Yuman's earlier comment about undead being drawn to stronger undead starts eating at Zenos. And it doesn't take long before he figures out that Carmilla is the real reason those ghosts and that zombie showed up here in the first place. Some time later, Zenos returns home and casually asks Carmilla if she has any idea what's behind the sudden rise in undead sightings nearby. But honestly, she's completely clueless and had no idea she was drawing in that kind of trouble. Looking a little uneasy, she glances at him and asks if he's thinking about throwing her out because of it. Zenos pauses, weighing the situation. Given how her presence seems to influence the surroundings, he figures it might be smarter and safer to let her near him. Carmilla's face goes bright red hearing that because no one's ever said they wanted her around in her entire undead existence, so she promises to stick by Zenos' side from now on. But she makes it very clear she's still gonna mess with him whenever she gets the chance. The following day, Crescent checks in with his supervisor, who's eager to give him props for how he handled the recent exorcism. Word is, Crescent took out all those monsters with one massive spell, but Crescent knows that wasn't him, and Zenos who did everything. The supervisor even says that since Zenos didn't stand out, it means the rumors must be exaggerated, so he won't be getting into Goldrin's group after all. Crescent could have kept quiet and walked away with all the glory, but the guilt's eating him alive, so he finally speaks up and tells the truth. Zenos was the one who took out the undead and the Zombie King, and he saw it with his own eyes. After that, he leaves the office feeling like crap because his reputation probably took a serious dive for admitting he lied. But Zenos saved his ass, and now that he's come clean, Crescent's confident Zenos will get into the research lab. So as far as he's concerned, that makes them even. Later on, Bernardo swings by with a smile and tells Zenos that Goldrin's research team has officially reached out, and they want to meet with him. Zenos is glad to hear it, but he's also a little shocked, since he figured Crescent would have taken credit for everything. Still, it means he's cleared the first hurdle in getting close to Goldrin, which is a big step. Bernardo tells him not to celebrate yet because there's still an interview with the professor, and that's going to be a whole other challenge. Zenos doesn't get why there are so many hoops to jump through just to join a research faction, but Bernardo explains that Goldrin's got a lot of influence, and he's picky about who he brings in. Zenos then asks why Goldrin has that much pull to begin with. If he's just another advanced healer, shouldn't someone like Bernardo, who's ranked even higher, be the one with more clout? Bernardo laughs and says titles don't always mean much when it comes to real power, especially in his case, since he earned his rank from breakthroughs in drug research, not political strength. Zenos doesn't really get the political side of things, but he says he's heading out to answer Goldrin's summons, and the others wish him luck. He finally shows up to the meeting room, and after Goldrin gives a quick intro, the very first thing he asks is what Zenos brings to the table. Zenos just replies that he's a healer, so he heals people, but Goldrin's not impressed. He says that answer's too basic, and any average healer can patch people up. But someone like Zenos should be aiming way higher. He points out that healers carry serious weight in this country, and honestly, the whole nation probably wouldn't exist without them. Still, it's the elites who get to benefit the most from all that work. That's exactly why Goldrin's goal is to break into the upper ranks, not because he wants to make the world better, but because he wants to cash in on the same system. He believes a person's worth is tied to how useful they are, and he's not interested in wasting time on people with nothing to offer. Once he's done laying out his twisted philosophy, he tells Zenos to recreate the same magic circle he showed off in class so he can evaluate him properly. Zenos has no idea how this helps, but he goes along with it anyway. When Goldrin examines the circle, he stands up and says that starting from tomorrow Zenos is officially part of his lab. The next morning, Zenos is walking through the halls when Goldrin's research group marches past him in a line. He spots Crescent at the back, and Crescent waves him over, telling him to hurry up and join the line. With a grin, Crescent welcomes him to the group, but reminds him that since he got in first, Zenos better show some respect to his seniors. After all, the only reason Zenos made it in is because he put in the good word. Zenos asks why he even bothered telling the truth back then, since keeping quiet would have protected his rep. Crescent admits it was partly guilt, but also because he figured riding Zenos' wave might work out in his favor. Zenos respects the honesty at least, but right now, he's wondering what's up with this weird line. Crescent explains that it's part of Goldrin's usual routine, his daily patient rounds. Zenos asks if they really need a whole squad just to check on one person, but it's more about appearances. Goldrin only visits VIPs with influence, so showing up with a crowd makes a statement. Zenos didn't join for this though, because he's only here to dig into Goldrin's secrets. and he can't do that from the back of the pack. So without saying a word, he starts heading straight for the front. The patient tells Goldrin that his foot has been killing him since yesterday. So Goldrin takes a quick look and sees it's just a basic sprain. He says he'll only need 3 assistants for this one. Zenos doesn't know what that means at first, but then watches Goldrin cast a spell and pull energy straight out of 3 of the students standing nearby. He funnels that energy into the man's foot to heal it, and while it works, the students used in the process are clearly affected. Zenos quickly heads back to Crescent and asks what kind of spell Goldrin just used. Crescent explains that Goldrin's specialty is a type of magic called health transfer. It lets you shift life force from one person into another, which makes it possible to heal big injuries, even if the caster isn't that strong. So if someone's hurt, you can basically donate vitality from other people to speed up their recovery. For more severe wounds, the spell needs a lot more life energy, so they usually spread the cost out among multiple people, and the usual downside is just a bit of fatigue. Zenos finds that pretty fascinating, and it definitely explains why Goldrin surrounds himself with so many healers. But Crescent tells him that's not the full story. There's word going around that Director Shalbard might be stepping down soon, and Goldrin is already trying to lock in votes for the next leadership race. Zenos thanks him for the info, and while they're talking, he decides to ask if Crescent's ever heard of a guy named Afreed. Crescent nods and says he knows the guy, but he never really liked him. Afreed got invited to one of Goldrin's fancy dinner parties and then just vanished. Zenos asks what kind of party that even is, and Crescent says Goldrin throws these exclusive dinners for his top-tier subordinates, and it's a big deal to get invited. But after that night, no one's seen or heard from Afreed again. Zenos later fills Arnardo in on everything, thinking this might be enough. But Arnardo tells him they're not even close. What they have confirms Goldrin was probably tied to Afreed's disappearance, but it's nowhere near enough to prove it. He needs Zenos to climb higher, earn Goldrin's trust, and get invited to one of those dinner parties. If he can pull it off, Arnardo even promises to pay him more. Zenos agrees to keep digging, even though he was hoping to head home, but on one condition. Once this whole thing is done, Arnardo has to come clean about everything he knows about Zenos' old master, whatever the result is. At the same time over in the slums, Linga is busy messing with the lock on Zenos' clinic door, and after a bit of effort, she finally gets it open. She came by to tidy the place up for him while he's away, but hey, if she ends up sniffing a few of his belongings while she's here, that's her business. Just as she's starting to look around, she picks up on someone else's presence, so she gets ready to throw hands, but it turns out to be Zofia. They both demand to know what the other is doing here, but Linga quickly catches sight of the mop Zofia's holding, so clearly, they had the same plan in mind. A few minutes later, Lo straight up busts the damn door down again because she also showed up with cleaning on her mind. Zofia and Linga kind of figured she'd turn up eventually, though they really wish she didn't have to destroy the door in the process because it's just more work for them now. The following morning in the capital, Zenos catches up with Crescent, who tells him he's just scored the huge honor of babysitting Goldrin's precious dog. In truth, Crescent is just dumping his pet-sitting job onto Zenos, but Zenos can't help but question if Crescent is actually doing any real research at all. Crescent explains that Goldrin's busy holding a private meeting with the 7 top noble houses he's been buttering up, which is why they're stuck watching his dog. Crescent doesn't really mind, though, because he figures this is all just part of working his way into Goldrin's inner circle. Zenos asks if he's seriously gunning for a promotion, and Crescent says that's the whole point. Once he climbs high enough, he'll be living the high life with all the luxuries that come with it. Zenos seems thrown off, since he figured most healers got into the field because they actually wanted to help people. In a perfect world that'd be true, but Crescent tells him things don't work like that. He admits that there was a time when he dreamed of curing the sick and saving lives, but his healing magic has limits, and it can't fix everything. And since he can't save everyone, he'd rather use his skills to secure money and women and comfort for himself. In other words, living every man's dream. Right then, a guy named Bond strolls over and asks Crescent if he's stuck on dog duty for Goldrin again. Crescent brushes it off, saying he's just doing what he's gotta do, but Bonds doesn't buy it. He tells him it's gonna take way more than brown-nosing Goldrin if he actually wants to move up in life. After tossing that bit of wisdom, he walks off, and Zenos turns to ask who the hell that was. Crescent says Bonds is Goldrin's first secretary, though Zenos finds it hard to believe someone that reckless could even hold a position like that. Crescent gets the reaction, but apparently, Bonds landed the position thanks to being an old buddy of Goldrin's, so now he just coasts by without doing much of anything. Right on cue, Bonds suddenly yells out Crescent's name, probably because he overheard him talking smack, and without warning, he hurls a bottle straight at him. Lucky for Crescent, Bonds is too drunk to hit the broadside of a barn, so the bottle completely misses him. But it crashes right next to Goldrin's dog and spooks her so bad she bolts. Crescent panics because if he loses Madam Milk, He might as well start digging his own grave, and Goldrin would absolutely murder him. He dashes after her, but the moment Milk rushes into the road, a carriage flies by and bam, she gets hit. Crescent rushes over and immediately tries to heal her. He throws a high-tier healing spell at her injuries, but even after all that, Milk is still squashed like a meat pie. Zenos checks her out and tells him not to panic because he stopped the bleeding, so she'll live. But Crescent is losing it because that's not enough. Even if she survives, she's going to have scars, and the only reason Goldrin loves this dog is because of how perfectly fluffy and flawless she is. So if he sees her like this, Crescent's finished. Zenos doesn't want the guy to get screwed over, so he raises his hand and starts working his own healing magic on Milk. Crescent tries to stop him, saying it's a waste of time. Sure, Zenos has insane power because he did wipe out a zombie king, after all, but this kind of healing takes serious skill, and regenerating skin without leaving a mark is something only top-level healers can do. But while Crescent's busy running his mouth, Zenos has already finished. Milk's totally fine, no bruises, no cuts, hell. Even her ribs are as good as new. She's basically perfect again, like nothing ever happened. And Zenos just tells him she should still take it easy for the rest of the day. A while later, Zenos heads back home and finds Yuman already there waiting for him. He asks if something's up, and she says she just wanted to see if he'd take a walk with her. Zenos didn't expect that, but he agrees, and once they're out in the woods, he asks if there's something on her mind. She turns toward him and says she wants to apologize because if she wasn't so useless, maybe she could have caught Goldrin's eye, and then Zenos wouldn't be stuck in this mess. Zenos tells her she doesn't owe him any apology, since Bernardo's already compensating him, and honestly, if it wasn't for this whole setup, he wouldn't have even gotten through the gates of the Royal Hospital, let alone gotten a shot at digging into his master's past. There's a lot for him to gain, so he makes it clear she shouldn't blame herself for any of this. Yuman's relieved to hear that, but since he brought it up, she realizes she doesn't know much about this master he always talks about, so she asks what kind of guy he was. Zenos says he's not totally sure because his master was kinda sketchy, to be fair. But the man did teach him to read and write, and shared a ton about magic and the world, so honestly, Zenos owes the guy everything. Yuman says that sounds a lot like her and Bernardo because when she first started out as a healer, he took her under his wing and passed down all kinds of research knowledge. That said, Bernardo's obsession with his work got so out of hand that his girlfriend ended up leaving him, and ever since, Yuman's been the one looking after him. That definitely raises a red flag, so Zenos asks what her relationship with Bernardo actually is, and she tells him Bernardo is her uncle, which explains why they're so close. Not long after, Zenos and Yuman are heading back toward the Royal Hospital campus when Crescent suddenly bolts over to them. He drops to his knees, practically pleading with Zenos for help. And judging from the look on Crescent's face, whatever he's gotten himself into isn't just minor, it's damn serious. The scene then shifts to Goldrin returning to his office after having dinner with Lord Fennel. His second assistant welcomes him back, but immediately notices the annoyed look on his face, prompting him to ask if something went wrong during the meeting. Goldrin says it wasn't anything serious, but during their conversation, Lord Fennel brought up that his daughter has recently broken out in an unusual rash on her face, and he wanted to know if Goldrin might be able to help with it. Goldrin takes a moment to think it over and figures it's probably a case of odd face disease. It's not dangerous or anything, and it usually clears up on its own. But if Fennel's daughter wants fast results, Goldrin would have to surgically remove the affected skin. The problem is, that kind of operation would leave a large scar, and there's no way someone like her would be okay with that. Goldrin then noted that there's another way. He could regenerate the skin using healing transfer magic with enough healthy donors. But the girl is apparently so ashamed of how she looks that she doesn't even let people see her face. At best, Goldrin might be able to bring in 1 or 2 assistants to help, but that's likely all she'll allow. The whole thing is clearly weighing on Lord Fennel, so Goldrin decides to take his mind off it by visiting his beloved dog Madam Milk. But while heading to her room, he walks past Bonds, who offhandedly jokes that Milk got hit by a carriage not too long ago. Goldrin instantly blows up, assuming Bonds had something to do with it. But Bonds tells him to relax, because the dog sitter who was out with Milk used healing magic on her, so she's fine now. Still skeptical, Goldrin lets it slide for the moment and rushes to check on Milk himself. And to his shock, Milk actually is okay. She seems a bit tired, but has no visible injuries or even a scratch on her. And that makes Goldrin stunned because he didn't expect someone could heal wounds so thoroughly that not even a scar remains. And since he left Crescent in charge of watching over Milk, he assumes Crescent must be the one responsible for this flawless healing job. Which brings us back to Crescent's crisis. Goldrin has tasked him with healing Lord Fennel's daughter, but Crescent knows he's not up to the job. He explains to Zenos that she's come down with a case of odd face, but Zenos doesn't think it's a big deal since the condition isn't dangerous and clears up naturally over time. Crescent agrees, but points out that Fennel's daughter is refusing to show her face at public gatherings while it looks like this, so something has to be done fast. Zenos wonders why they don't just slice out the infected area, but Crescent explains the infection runs too deep, so cutting it out would leave a massive scar across her face. And if he's the one responsible for disfiguring the daughter of one of the 7 most influential nobles, he's finished. Yuman then questions why Goldrin would even dump this level of responsibility on Crescent in the first place. Crescent says it's because Goldrin heard about the situation with Madame Milk and thinks Crescent is the one who performed the healing. Yuman tells him to just come clean and admit it was actually Zenos who healed her. But Crescent is terrified that if Goldrin finds out he took credit for Zenos' work again, he'll be kicked out without hesitation. That's why he's begging Zenos to help him pull this off without fail. Right then, Lily arrives with some tea for the group and introduces herself as Zenos' younger sister. Crescent is totally taken aback because he had no idea Zenos had such an adorable little sister. Lily happily accepts the compliment, but quickly adds that she already belongs to Zenos, so no matter how sweet Crescent is, she's off limits. That's not at all what Crescent meant when he praised her, so he tells her that since he and Zenos are already pretty close, that practically makes him family, meaning she's his little sister too. But Zenos comments that he doesn't recall ever agreeing to that big brother relationship. The following day, Goldrin brings Crescent to Lord Fennel's estate, and Crescent brings Zenos along with him. But as soon as Fennel greets them, he looks visibly distressed. He explains that there's been a complication. His daughter Charlotte is now refusing to allow any kind of procedure. Charlotte says she's terrified of ruining her looks, and no longer wants to take any risk of being scarred. Still, Fennel is confident that Goldrin can find a way to treat her without harming her appearance, and pleads with him to help persuade her. Goldrin agrees to try convincing her, so they all head over to Charlotte's room to have a talk. Fennel goes first, reassuring his daughter that the surgery will go just fine and that she can believe him because he's always been honest with her. But Charlotte quickly brings up the time he promised to buy her a fox fur coat for her birthday, and didn't follow through. That mess wasn't entirely Fennel's fault, but it's still a broken promise, and now there's not much else he can say to win her over. Next up, Goldrin steps in and tells Charlotte that he's a doctor from the Royal Hospital, and she has nothing to worry about because he'll handle the operation himself. But Charlotte isn't buying that shit because she's convinced someone might have paid him off to purposely mess up her face. While Fennel and Goldrin keep going back and forth trying to assure her that the whole thing is safe, Crescent starts drifting off into wild thoughts. He's imagining that if he's the one who fixes her face, maybe Charlotte will fall head over heels for him, and Zenos can't even be bothered to shoot that dream down. Crescent then asks Lord Fennel if he can say a few words to Charlotte, and once he gets the go-ahead, he introduces himself as one of Goldrin's aides. But before he can say anything else, Charlotte immediately shuts him down. She tells him his voice is irritating, and he's got no business talking to her. Since none of the others made any progress, Goldrin turns to Zenos and asks him to try instead. Zenos nods and walks up to her door, ready to give it a go. He calmly introduces himself as one of the assistants, and right as Charlotte's about to cut him off, Zenos jumps in first. He tells her he just wants a quick word about the operation. If she doesn't want to do it, that's fine. Honestly, who wouldn't be nervous about getting their face sliced open? And besides, the odd face thing isn't fatal. It just means she'll eventually be stuck with a big mole on the side of her face that makes her look like an old granny. That's all he came to say, so he turns around, ready to leave. But Charlotte calls out for him to stop. Turns out, the idea of looking like an old lady shook her up enough to change her mind. She agrees to let everyone come in and asks if what Zenos said was really true. Crescent tries to explain, but before he even gets a word out, she cuts him off again, telling him to shut his damn mouth because she still can't bear the thought of his toxic breath polluting the air. Goldrin chimes in and tells Charlotte that in past odd face cases, after about a month, the condition morphs into mole-like growths shaped like an old woman's face. That image terrifies Charlotte, so she desperately asks Goldrin if there's any way to stop that from happening. Goldrin explains that sadly, the only way to erase the mark is through surgery. But Charlotte still refuses because she's terrified it might not go well. Fennel gently reminds her that if they just sit around doing nothing, the mark will only keep spreading. That's why she needs to put her trust in Goldrin and let him handle it. She asks if he can give her his word that she won't be left with any scars. But Goldrin admits he can't make that kind of promise because actually he's not the one performing the actual operation. Hearing that, Charlotte bolts, yelling that she won't agree to anything unless someone can give her a 100% guarantee that it won't mess up her face. Sometime later, Zenos finds Charlotte out on the veranda attached to her room. She seems to love birds, since there's a whole group of them nearby. But Zenos quickly notices one of the birds looks injured. Charlotte tells him she found it in the garden not too long ago, and with how bad the injury looks, it'll probably never be able to fly again, just like her. With her face messed up, she can't show up at parties or go out dancing anymore, so pretty soon, no one will even remember her. Zenos calmly asks if she actually wants to get better. Charlotte shouts that of course she does, but she also refuses to end up with scars, so he should just stop bringing it up. What she doesn't notice is that while she's busy yelling, Zenos has already healed the bird's wing, and it's now flying around like nothing ever happened. Charlotte's stunned by how effortlessly Zenos fixed the bird, but Zenos tells her he can do the same for her. Whether someone's a noble, a commoner, or just a regular citizen, if they need help, he'll step in, because that's what being a healer means to him. Hearing this, Charlotte finally believes that Zenos actually knows what he's doing, so she chooses to trust him and agrees to the operation. Once Charlotte is sedated, Fennel steps out of the room and tells Goldrin to take care of everything. But Goldrin has no intention of lifting a finger himself, because he's already dumped the whole procedure on Zenos and Crescent. That said, he fully plans to take all the glory, so he warns Crescent not to screw it up. Zenos can clearly see Crescent starting to freak out, so he tells him he'll handle the entire operation if needed. Crescent appreciates that, but asks if Zenos has ever done something like this before. Technically, Zenos has performed this kind of surgery, though it was years ago when he was still a damn kid. Still, that gives him way more experience than Crescent, and he's just about to step in as the lead surgeon when Goldrin walks up and insists Crescent do the job himself. So that means Zenos is stuck as the assistant. With shaky hands, Crescent picks up the scalpel and tries to get started, but he's trembling all over. He's studied this kind of surgery during his time at the hospital, so he sticks to the standard procedure. But Zenos tells him to hold on a second while he does a quick body scan. Crescent doesn't even know what that means, so Zenos explains that he just took a peek inside Charlotte's body and located every single wart root, so that way, Crescent doesn't have to cut at random. Thanks to Zenos' guidance, the operation is going smoothly, up until the last root. That's when Crescent spots something terrible. The final root is entwined around Charlotte's facial nerve. Cutting it would mean slicing into the nerve, which would permanently change her face. Nerve repair is incredibly complex, so Crescent suggests they stop and transfer Charlotte to the Royal Hospital where she can be treated properly. But Goldrin couldn't care less about damn proper care, because all he cares about is his reputation. He swore to Fennel that he'd remove Charlotte's odd face marks, but doing that now would mean damaging her nerves and leaving her face disfigured. A decent doctor would have respected Crescent's warning and chosen the safer route. But Goldrin's a selfish coward, so he grabs Crescent's hand and forces him to cut the final root, nerve and all. Then he starts shouting, pretending that Crescent did it of his own accord, while Crescent stands there, stunned and speechless like a little mouse. Fennel bursts nears the room the moment he hears Goldrin shouting, only for Goldrin to immediately start blaming Crescent, loudly declaring that his useless assistant just sliced through Charlotte's facial nerves and left her permanently disfigured. A claim like that would absolutely destroy Crescent's future, and Goldrin couldn't care less. But Zenos isn't about to let that slide, not after Charlotte personally asked for his help. So he steps up and tells Fennel not to listen to Goldrin's nonsense, saying that a severed nerve is no big deal. Then, clearly fed up with just standing around, he shoves past Goldrin, whips out his scalpel, and carefully removes the last root himself. Right after, he uses his magic to completely restore Charlotte's nerves like nothing ever happened. A few hours later, Charlotte wakes up in bed with her father at her side. He's relieved to see her okay, but before she wants any hugs or reassurance, she needs to see her face. She grabs a mirror, and the second she sees her reflection, she breaks down crying, happy that the blemishes are gone. As far as Fennel knows, Goldrin was the one who performed the procedure, since he took all the credit before hurrying off, claiming he had urgent business related to the hospital elections. In return, Fennel pledged his full backing in that race. But Charlotte isn't buying the hero act. She remembers hearing Zenos' voice during the operation, gently reassuring her that everything would be fine. So deep down, she knows it was Zenos who truly saved her, and she'll always be grateful for that. Later that day, Zenos helps Yuman haul a bunch of bottles out of Renardo's lab. Yuman says they're part of Renardo's latest batch of potions, but she has zero clue what any of them are supposed to do. While they're in the storage room, Crescent comes dashing in with big news. Both he and Zenos have been invited to one of Goldrin's exclusive dinner parties. It sounds like a major opportunity, but Yuman notices that Crescent doesn't seem all that thrilled. He claims to be excited, but truthfully, he's a bit uneasy about dealing with Goldrin again after what happened. Still, it might open some important doors for him, so he decides to go anyway. The party's happening tonight, and Crescent tells Zenos he'll catch up with him downstairs in the hall. Soon after Goldrin's grand event begins, and once all the guests are comfortably settled, he steps forward and proudly declares that he's secured backing from Lord Fennel. With that key endorsement, his rise to becoming the next director of the Royal Hospital is practically guaranteed. Just a matter of wrapping it up before the month is out. The whole room breaks into applause, and even Crescent, who was feeling unsure about all this earlier, ends up enjoying himself, since it's the perfect chance to rub shoulders with all the elite names Goldrin brought together. While Crescent stays busy mingling, Zenos shifts into investigative mode to dig up anything on Afreed. After a bit of probing, he finds out that Afreed was seen looking after Bonds at the last dinner gathering. So Zenos heads over to Bonds and casually asks if he remembers running into someone named Afreed at the last party. Bonds does remember him, says that while everyone else was busy networking, Afreed was the only one who brought him a glass of water. According to Bonds, the guy was kind of odd, but at least he liked him. None of the other guests cared, since Goldrin usually warns his pupils not to talk to Bonds and calls him a liar. Zenos finds it weird that Goldrin would trash-talk Bonds like that, especially after giving him such a high position as first secretary. Lily curiously asks why Goldrin gave him such a good role if he doesn't actually do anything. So Bonds tells her it's because he and Goldrin go way back. But when she presses him on how they met, he snaps and tells her to drop it because he doesn't remember. Zenos figures pushing Bonds any further is pointless because he's already way too drunk to remember anything useful. But Lily's not convinced. She's pretty sure Bonds is hiding one of Goldrin's big secrets. So she grabs a waiter and asks for several more bottles of wine, planning to keep pouring drinks until Bonds slips up and spills everything. For the rest of the night, Lily lays on the charm, hyping up Bonds non-stop while keeping his glass full. Eventually, she gets him completely hammered, exactly what she was aiming for. Even though it's going well, Zenos is a bit rattled seeing someone like Lily pull off something this slick. She tells him she picked up the move from Carmilla, and he's not too thrilled that Carmilla's been teaching Lily shady tactics. But regardless, it worked, so he leans in and asks Bonds directly if he knows what happened to Afreed after their last encounter. Bonds is barely hanging on, but he mumbles that he remembers Afreed walking him outside for air. So Zenos figures he'll try the same move. Maybe if they retrace those steps, Bonds might start opening up again. He helps guide the stumbling drunk toward the garden, hoping the fresh air will spark some memory. But on the way out, Bonds stumbles and drops his wine bottle. Instead of getting mad, he just starts cracking up, rambling about the old days. He's so out of it. He mistakes Zenos for Goldrin, and suddenly he starts going off about a moment that apparently changed everything 13 years ago. Zenos decides to just roll with it and pretends to be Goldrin, hoping Bonds keeps spilling the good stuff. Bonds begins talking about how Goldrin used to be a researcher whose project had hit a brick wall, until one day, an explosion turned everything around. After that, with Lord Fennel backing him, Goldrin managed to land a position as a professor at the Royal Hospital, and now he's on the verge of snagging the director's seat. But before Bonds can spill anything else, he passes out right there on the ground. Zenos lets out a quiet sigh because he was so close to hearing something major. But now that Bonds is out, there's no way to push further. So he turns to Lily and says he's gonna leave Bonds with a caretaker, and they should go rest up a bit. Lily asks if that means they're wrapping up the info hunt, but Zenos shakes his head because he knows they're still missing something big. That's when Carmilla suddenly pops out from behind the couch, catching Zenos totally off guard. He can't believe she's here, especially in a room crawling with healers. But Carmilla just grins and says that chaos is way more fun when it's risky. Turns out, she overheard most of Bonds' drunken rant and thinks she might have a lead on whatever he was babbling about. Elsewhere deep in the slums, things are looking grim. Zofia and the crew are starting to feel the weight of Zenos' absence. Usually, they'd be bickering about who gets the privilege to be here. But with Zenos gone, there's no point in fighting. It's just a waiting game now. Suddenly, one of Zofia's men bursts in, clearly freaked out because something horrible just happened. Apparently, Zond and a few others were helping out on a construction job when a support beam came crashing down and impaled Zond straight through the stomach. The guy giving the report is drenched in blood, and Zofia doesn't need to ask how bad it is because she can already tell. And with Zenos still missing, waiting for him to show up isn't an option. So if they want Zond to live, they've got to act fast. Linga says they should rush Zond over to Zenos immediately. But Zofia remembers that Zenos is currently undercover at the Royal Hospital, and showing up there could blow his whole cover. Still, both Linga and Lo argue that if Zenos came back and found out someone died while he was gone, that would hit him harder than any blown mission. At the same time at the Royal Hospital, Carmilla shares a little gossip she picked up while snooping around campus. Supposedly, there was a massive explosion 13 years ago, and Lord Fennel got caught right in the middle of it. But somehow, despite how destructive it was, Fennel walked away without a scratch, and from that day on he's been loyal to Goldrin. When a powerful noble suddenly owes their life to a healer after a disaster, most people assume that healers saved their life. But based on how bad that explosion supposedly was, Fennel should have needed a complete rebuild from head to toe. Zenos then points out that full-body healing is doable as long as the person's heart is still ticking. But while he might be capable of pulling that off, there's no shot Goldrin had the skills to do it. so Lily thinks someone else had to be the real savior. She believes another healer must have stepped in and patched up Fennel, but before Fennel woke up, that healer left the scene. Goldrin probably jumped in, claimed all the credit, and used that moment to get Fennel in his pocket and boost his way through the hospital ranks. Lily also figures that Bonds must have witnessed everything and has been blackmailing Goldrin with it. And when Afreed was looking after Bonds at the last party, maybe Bonds let something slip. That might explain why Afreed vanished, afraid Goldrin would come after him. Just then, Crescent walks in, saying he's been hunting all over for Lily. He just finished chatting with some big-name guests and wanted to introduce her, thinking it'd be good networking. But Lily brushes him off, saying she couldn't care less about politics and would rather stick with Zenos. Still, since Crescent won't back off, she agrees to tag along for now. After Lily heads off, Carmilla leans in and asks Zenos if he's considered the other possibility behind the explosion. Sure, Lily's theory makes a lot of sense, but based on how Carmilla described the blast, there's no way Fennel was the only one caught in it. A whole crowd must have gotten hit, yet somehow the only survivor just so happened to be the exact noble Goldrin needed on his side. Now toss in the fact that Goldrin knows how to do life force transfers, and the pieces start clicking. Goldrin likely drained all the wounded, funneling their energy into Fennel, which means he basically sacrificed a bunch of people just to save one. Technically, under this kingdom's law, that wouldn't even count as a major offense. Still, Zenos hates the idea of throwing away lives like that. And considering the details, it's possible Afreed found out the truth and vanished to stay off Goldrin's radar. Carmilla asks what Zenos plans to do now that he knows all this. But he just says he's going to report everything to Bernardo and move on because it's not his job to pass judgment. Zenos gets up to return to the party, but as soon as he walks in, he notices the whole room focused on something outside. He asks Crescent what's going on, and Crescent says there's some commotion at the main entrance. When Zenos looks out, he spots Yumin standing at the gate. The guards have her blocked, telling her no one gets in without an official invite from Goldrin. But Yumin insists it's urgent and she needs to speak with her friend now. Suddenly, Lo calls out Zenos' name from the crowd. Zofia quickly scolds her for blowing their cover, saying this is exactly what they were supposed to avoid. Lo apologizes, but Zahn's condition is critical, and there's no time to play it safe anymore. When Goldrin hears there are demi-humans outside, he flips out and demands that the guards remove them at once, but Linga knocks the guards down instantly, and Lo storms in with Zahn slumped over her shoulder. She shouts for Zenos, saying it's an emergency, and as soon as people hear her say his name, murmurs start spreading, and everyone wants to know if Zenos really associates with demi-humans. Zenos tunes out the crowd and turns to Louru, asking what the hell's going on. She tells him Zong was seriously injured in a construction mishap. They rushed to the hospital dorms looking for Zenos, but instead bumped into Yumin, and after laying everything out for her, she let them know that Zenos was actually here. Goldrin storms over and demands to know what Zenos is doing associating with demi-humans. Zenos brushes him off and tells the others he's heading out to help. Goldrin then questions if Zenos seriously plans on helping them, warning that doing so will cost him any shot at joining Goldrin's inner circle. But Zenos couldn't care less about being part of some elite clique because his job is to heal whoever needs it. He then tells Crescent goodbye and turns to Lily, saying it's time to move. Without hesitation, he scoops her up and leaps over the railing straight to the ground floor. Crescent watches them disappear into the distance, baffled that Zenos would just toss away such a promising future. Goldrin steps up to Crescent and tells him not to get any stupid ideas. Now that Zenos has defied him, Goldrin vows to personally make sure he never gets to practice medicine in that hospital again. Crescent admits it was reckless, but even if staying in Goldrin's favor means power and influence, he can't forget how Zenos would treat anyone, whether it was a stray or a noble, without bias. And he knows damn well that Goldrin would sell out anyone if it meant climbing higher, but that's not who Crescent wants to be. So he makes up his mind, leaps over the railing, and follows after Zenos, hoping to help. But by the time he catches up, Zenos is already finished patching up Zahn. So in the end, he didn't even need to throw his future away. Yumin calls him a dumbass for tossing it all for nothing, but also she heard what he said earlier, and those might have been the most honorable words she's ever heard from him. So yeah, he's still annoying, but she's proud to call him a friend. The following day, Zenos catches up with Bernardo and fills him in on everything he uncovered about Goldrin's shady past. Bernardo recalls Afreed once saying he was in some kind of accident as a kid. That must mean he was one of the survivors from back then. And if Goldrin was the one responsible for the blast in the first place, then Afreed could be planning to settle the score during Goldrin's upcoming promotion party. If that's the case, Bernardo decides he'll have to show up himself. But aside from that, he tells Zenos he's genuinely grateful for all the dirt he helped dig up. So his assignment is officially complete. Zenos asks if Bernardo really means it, but this was the deal from the beginning. Bernardo just needs a little time to sort out Zenos' exit paperwork. and once that's squared away, he'll tell him everything he knows about Zenos' old mentor. Until then, Yumin suggests they should throw a farewell party to send him off. That evening, they all gather in Zenos' room. Crescent is already wasted, sulking over the fact that Zenos is leaving. Yumin and Lily tease him for being such a mess, but it doesn't help. Zenos tries to lift his spirits by saying he's flexible enough to land on his feet wherever he goes. Crescent appreciates the kind words, but they do nothing for his mood. And now he's worried that he's drinking so much he's seeing things, and swears that there's a wraith glaring at him through the wall. The next morning, Zenos is set to head out, so he and Lily say their goodbyes. But before they leave, Yumin hands him a note from Bernardo that's supposed to explain the truth about Zenos and his master. However, when they get to Bernardo's office to grab it, they notice something's off. There's something weird hidden in his desk. And right then, somewhere else, Bernardo has already massacred everyone at Goldrin's big victory celebration. Mere minutes earlier, Goldrin had been basking in the glow of his rising fortune, savoring the thought of what life would be like once he officially took over as hospital director. That's when Lord Fennel appeared, wearing a pleasant smile as he congratulated Goldrin, saying it was about time he claimed the role he had long earned. Goldrin thanked him politely, but the moment stuck with him, dragging his mind back to the incident that kicked everything off 13 years ago. Back then, there was a huge explosion at a magic tools factory, and Goldrin was already on his way back to his hometown after years of research had led him nowhere. On the road, he saw a noble lying injured, and he figured healing the guy might pay off later. What he didn't realize was that the man lying there would turn out to be one of the 7 major nobles in the country. Even more unexpected, it was the first time Goldrin's health transfer magic actually worked, though it came at a cost. He pulled life force from the other dying victims of the explosion to save that one noble. Too bad for him, Bonds happened to capture a photo of the whole thing. To keep him quiet, Goldrin offered him the role of his first secretary, keeping him close to protect the secret. As that memory fades, Bernardo walks over with a bottle of wine in hand, offering his congratulations. Goldrin scoffs, asking if he's already here to start kissing up to the next hospital director. Bernardo doesn't care how he sees it, but Goldrin brings up Zenos, saying the kid had some promise once, but ended up a letdown. He recalls how he invited Zenos to one of his fancy dinner parties, but the boy ditched the event to go treat some demihumans instead. According to Goldrin, anyone who's part of his faction can't go around prioritizing peasants, because that sort of thing ruins your political standing. To him, not all lives hold the same value, plain and simple. Right after that, Fennel takes the floor and raises his glass for a toast in Goldrin's honor. He's about to share the story of how Goldrin saved him all those years ago. But Goldrin cuts him off, saying there's no need to dig into a sad past. Fennel just laughs it off, calling him humble for not bragging about his achievements, and tells him to go take the stage. Goldrin lifts his glass high, thinking this moment is the height of his career, and toasts to the bright future ahead. Meanwhile, Zenos and Yumin are searching through Bernardo's office when they stumble upon a photo. In it, they clearly see Goldrin stealing the life force of others to heal Fennel. Yumin immediately spots a young Ifrit in the picture, and now she's convinced that he's out for revenge. But what really stuns her is the sight of a woman in the photo, someone whose face leaves her completely shaken. Back at the party, Goldrin suddenly snaps awake after being knocked out cold. Blood's dripping from his mouth, and he's confused as hell, trying to figure out what's going on. That's when Bernardo casually walks over to him. Goldrin stands up, only to see all his guests lying unconscious, so Bernardo tells him that he spiked the wine with a special homemade toxin. He says everyone here has about an hour tops, unless they get immediate treatment. But as for Goldrin, he got a smaller dose, so he might last 2 hours if he's lucky. Goldrin starts to panic, asking what the hell he's trying to do. Bernardo says he's just recreating the explosion from 13 years ago. Goldrin's face twists in horror, asking how he even knows about that. Bernardo tells him it's all thanks to Zenos, who dug up the lead. He explains how he went to talk to Bonds, who wasn't gonna spill it first, but a little medicine and some alcohol made him spill every last shit detail. Bernardo even managed to get his hands on a photo, and that's when the color drains from Goldrin's already pale face because he thought he burned every copy of that picture. Bernardo reminds him that back then, Goldrin chose to save Fennel and left the rest to die, just because he thought their lives were worth less. Goldrin tries to defend himself, saying they all would have died anyway, but Bernardo reveals that Ifrit survived the blast. Then he drops the real bomb. His fiancée was also among the victims that day, but she didn't make it because Goldrin's damn healing spell had drained her to save someone else. Now, he gives Goldrin the same damn choice again. There are enough people here that Goldrin can fully heal one of them, so who will he pick? Goldrin's mind starts racing. He figures he can just get the antidote straight from Bernardo. But then Bernardo stuns him by drinking the poisoned wine himself, putting his life on the line too. If Goldrin thinks Bernardo's got the antidote, he'd have to save him first. But Goldrin doesn't buy it. He doesn't trust Bernardo, not even for a second. So he makes his move, and he starts draining the life force from the others to heal himself first, planning to treat Fennel afterward because that's the most useful play. Bernardo watches in disgust and tells him that his own life force is stronger than theirs. If he really cared, he could save more people by sacrificing himself. Goldrin just laughs that off and says his life is worth more than any of theirs. That's the final straw for Bernardo, but before he can do anything, the poison finally starts hitting him hard. Right then, Zenos, Yumin, and Crescent come running in, and they freeze the moment they see the wrecked hall. Bernardo asks what the hell they're doing there, and Yumin tells him she found the photo in his drawer with his fiancée in it, so she rushed over, terrified he'd do something reckless. Zenos then starts scanning the scene and realizes that everyone's been poisoned, and Bernardo begins recounting what happened. He says that 13 years ago, he and his fiancée were just a couple of rookie healers full of dreams, but when the explosion happened, he was told she died in it, and that crushed him, so he tried moving past her death by throwing himself into his work. But then Afreed showed up at one of Goldrin's parties and told him the truth. She didn't die in the explosion. Goldrin stole her life to save Fennel, and that makes him so damn angry. Bernardo says Afreed vanished right after dropping that bomb, and without any solid proof, there was nothing he could do. That's why he hired Zenos to help dig up the truth and maybe find Afreed again. Yumin tells him that what he did was still wrong, and before Bernardo can answer, Crescent suddenly snaps. He yells that he'd probably go nuts too if he lost someone he loved. Not that he's got anyone, but poisoning a bunch of random guests just ain't it. He screams that Bernardo's a healer, so how the hell could he even think about hurting people like this? Zenos gently pats him on the back and says he'll take it from here. He brings up the question Bernardo asked him once, about which coin he'd pick up if he dropped a gold, silver, and bronze coin. And now Zenos finally gives his answer. He says he'd pick them all up because he grew up with nothing. And just like that, he's going to try and save everyone here, no matter their worth. Bernardo panics, telling him there's nothing to gain from that. Zenos agrees that he won't gain a thing. But if this goes public, Bernardo's going down as a murderer, and Yumin will be dragged down with him. Yumin's eyes well up, asking if he's really doing this for her. Zenos nods and says that it's his way of paying her back for that farewell party, because it was the first time in his life someone was actually sad to see him leave. Bernardo warns him again, healing won't cure the poison, but Zenos just says there's no time to identify it anyway, so he starts healing all the people at once. Bernardo tells him it won't detoxify the poison, it'll only ease the symptoms. But then he suddenly realizes he's standing in the area of Zenos' basic healing spell, and it finally clicks what Zenos is trying to do. Zenos explains that most toxins naturally leave the body over time, if the person doesn't die first, and what he's doing is helping everyone's body hang in there long enough to fight the poison off. So it's just a matter of whether his healing outlasts the poison. Yumin and Crescent step up to help too, and Zenos tells them to stick with the ones who look the weakest. Bernardo watches in disbelief because the basic heal spell isn't even supposed to last this long. But Zenos just shrugs and says he wouldn't know because he never had a formal education to learn the limits. That hits Bernardo, and he starts opening up. He talks about his fiancée, how she became a healer just to save lives. She was the most decent, selfless person he ever met. And then there's Goldrin, the exact opposite. Bernardo says he just couldn't sit back and watch someone like that become director. That's why he snapped. But now, looking at all this, he regrets everything. He thanks Zenos for pulling him back before he turned into something even worse, and Zenos tells him sure, he can thank him with a bonus, because healing this many people sure as hell ain't easy. Soon, all the guests start waking up one by one. The poison's finally out of their systems, but Goldrin's still lying there, pale and twitching, and he starts yelling at Zenos to heal him too. Zenos calmly tells him he doesn't take orders, especially not from someone like him. Goldrin grits his teeth but can't do anything, so he tells the healers from his own faction to help him instead. But then the memory hits them, how he tried to drain their life force while they were unconscious, and none of them move, and they straight up refuse. Zenos looks down at him and says he's still willing to do it for the right price. He scribbles down a number with more zeros than mistresses in his sorry life, and the old man flips out, saying that's robbery for a simple heal. Zenos shrugs again, saying then he can just die. So Goldrin panics and agrees on the spot. But before Zenos casts anything on this jerk, Fennel walks in. He tells Goldrin that they'll be having a very detailed talk later, and it finally hits him that he's about to lose everything. Not long after, Bernardo gets locked up, and Zenos and Yumin come by to visit him. Bernardo, still acting like his usual cheerful idiot self, seems surprised they managed to get permission to see him this fast. Zenos tells him it's thanks to a few contacts he has in the Royal Guard. And right then Krishna shows up, claiming Zenos is just using this visit as an excuse to see her. Zenos doesn't even bother arguing and just lets her stay in her fantasy bubble before turning back to Bernardo because he's got questions. Yuman jumps in first, asking if he really did poison the guests at the party. But Bernardo casually says he technically didn't. He only made a chemical that would knock everyone out and freeze them for a while. Just enough to recreate the explosion scene from 13 years ago and get Goldrin to admit what he did. But the moment he started coughing blood, he knew something was off. He swears he didn't mess up the formula, and that's when it hit him. Someone else had poisoned the wine too. He figures Afreed was the one behind it, probably hiding among the collapsed guests, just watching it all unfold. Yuman lights up at the thought that Bernardo's actually innocent, but he shakes his head. Even after realizing the poison was real, he was still willing to let everyone die if it meant getting revenge. Krishna, thinking things over, says that with the proof they've got, and considering Bernardo's friends with Zenos, she'll pull some strings to get him released soon. Yuman gladly asks her to do that, and they wrap it up. Right before they leave, Bernardo stops Zenos and tells him to be careful. He's sure it's nearly impossible for Afreed to have survived after Goldrin drained his life force, which means he might not even be human anymore. Bernardo believes Afreed's not just after revenge. His goals are darker, and since Zenos ruined his little show, he might be the next target. But Zenos just shrugs it off and says he doesn't give a damn. If Afreed wants to come after him, he'll hit him with one hell of a bill for all the trouble. And with that, he heads home to his chaotic, unwanted harem and gets back to doing what he does best, being the underground healer who'll treat anyone or anything for the right price. Somewhere else in the kingdom, we finally see the one pulling the strings, and it's the damn guide. He's taken over Alfred's body and looks seriously disappointed that his entire plan just went straight to hell. But this is the end of season 1 of this anime, so don't forget to like and subscribe to help me continue.